Okay, my name is Lynn Noble, and so today what we're going to be doing is a literacy training, and I'll have you guys help keep me on time and stuff like that, because we're starting at 7:45 and we're ending at 11:45. Is that everybody in agreement about that? Then I thought we would take a break about 9:50. We're going to have an introduction, we're gonna talk about the reading brain, and then we're gonna talk about the 5 pillars of reading instruction. And then we're going to, this ending task is where we're gonna come back and just sort of apply that. I'm just sort of giving you guys an overview of the 5 pillars of reading instruction. But I have a worksheet that you're going to do in this intro. I'm gonna make you take it's a pre-test about reading instruction, and then you're gonna see that throughout the PowerPoint, some of the things that you're not able to answer, and through our conversation, I hope that you'll be able to answer. Does that make sense? And so what I want to do is, we'll go here. And so I always like to start with having folks just read these couple of literacy facts. And then I'm going to ask you to turn and talk to your neighbors, because really, reading instruction, there is a lot going on in the world today about reading instruction. And everyone is very concerned about how our children in the United States are performing when it comes to reading instruction. So just sort of read these reading facts. How many of you does it stress you out? Does anybody get stressed at all? You don't get stressed? Well, you guys are sort of primary. Hi, primary people, come in and have a seat. Well, while we're waiting for these guys to come in, I just want you to turn and talk. Which one resonates with you? Do you believe these facts? Do you believe them?
Yeah.
So where do you think most of our reading instruction occurs? What do we know? What's that golden rule about what we say about reading instruction? Does anybody know that golden rule? What happens? What do we say? K2. What are kids learning how to do? Learning to read. And what do we say that they're having in 3rd and up? Reading to learn. So why is primary so absolutely critical? So K, 1st and 2nd grade teacher, that stress, what are you guys supposed to be doing? Teaching them how to read. And then what is that 3rd grade teacher feeling like? I'm supposed to be teaching them how to learn from their reading, all right? So these are just literacy facts that we know that 1 in 4 children in America grow up without learning to read. And the students who don't read proficiently by 3rd grade, that catch-up rate, it becomes more difficult to get kids caught up. Because how do you think a 3rd grader feels if he knows he can't read? Defeated. And how, right, okay, and looking at the kids that you're working with, that our goal as a primary staff is that our goal is to teach them how to read. And right now, we've got the war on reading. How many of you are paying attention to the people that are all about phonics? And then what they're using right now is the 3 cueing system, that they're really complaining about the 3 cueing systems, about how a kid looks at print, does that make sense? And they feel like it's just sort of that whole language approach to reading. And so if you get on and start doing research, you're going to see that we have the reading wars are going on, and it's fascinating to listen to all of them. And then you're going to hear that term, a balanced literacy approach, about how we should approaching teaching reading. So, all right. Any other comments? You're really sort of quiet at this time of the morning, and you're going to notice that I'm going to make you do a lot of talking, okay? Because I'm not going to do all the talking in here today. I'm going to make you do some talking. Anything? But does this thumbs up? Do you guys agree with those facts? Yeah. Okay. All right. Now, read my long, lengthy goal about why I'm here today. So I'm hoping today's day is a conversation. In a minute, we're getting ready to do our introductions, and we're going to talk about our stories, because you guys have to understand where I'm coming from, and I have to understand where you're coming from. But today, my goal, that this is a conversation. Okay, I'm not going to sit here and throw all kinds of dittos at you and worksheets and handouts for you guys to go do. I'm going to have a conversation with you about what I know about reading instruction. Alright? Okay. So, before I start my story, I'm going to make you take a test. And we call it a pre-test. And so, don't start it. I want you just to look through it, and then I'm going to give you my directions. Don't you love tests? Okay. Okay. All right. So notice that what I want you to do the first, it says, please write the definitions of each of the following words. So we have phoning, graphing, phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, and reading. I want you just to tell me what your definitions are of those. And then I'm asking you to please answer the following questions. And you've got sort of about a page of those. Then it comes over here to this second page, and it says the 5 pillars of reading instructions. Do not do this page. This is as we go through our conversation, we're going to be talking and taking notes. So does everybody feel pretty comfortable about you're just doing that first page and the back side? Alright, so I'm going to give you, this is our warm-up activity, and then we're going to come back, and then we're going to share our stories about who we are and about how we feel about reading. So this is just sort of your, we call it your activity. You come in to get your brain warmed up. So this is your morning brain exercise to get your brain rolling. And if you feel that you want to chit-chat with your neighbors, if you're more comfortable, sort of like, hey, I'm not quite sure I know this, chit-chat, talk to each other, okay? But I want you to finish up this page. And I think that probably should take just about 5 minutes, sort of, okay? Alright? Alright, so warming up our brain, your morning activity. How many of you have an activity when your kids come in that they know that they come in and they sort of sit down and they get busy and they start doing something? A little bit, do they? Yeah, so this is sort of your activity. Then we're going to come together and talk about who we are and our feelings about reading instruction. And if you have any questions, let me know. Does everybody have a pencil? I was a bad teacher, did not give me pencils. Does everybody have? Do you have a pencil, sweetheart? Okay, all right. I think I'm set. Oh, thank you. You're across the hall. Fabulous. All right. story?
30, number 18, because you see
18, what color?
orange.
Orange, okay.
So I started with one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a dance for you.
This will be really nice.
Okay, what is the thing between you and
Okay,
Yeah.
so just know that that's why she wants you.
Yeah, that, she did explain that.
Okay, all right.
Oh.
Okay, all right, give me a thumbs up if you're if you're finished. Thumbs up. How are you ladies over there? Are you guys about done? You think, did you answer your questions? Because here's what's gonna happen. As much, so good. So you're going to use, this is gonna be a document that I want you to keep. And we're gonna come back and we're gonna have conversations, because this is gonna be those essential questions that help us with our understanding of reading instruction, because what you guys have to do as primary teachers is so serious, okay? So I'm gonna start now. You're probably like, well, how is she doing this? But I'm gonna sort of start with my story about who I am and why I'm here with you today. And then I'm gonna make you share what you teach, and then just how your view on reading. What is your role to helping to teach reading? Does that make sense? Because what do we know, the number one thing for learning to happen in your classroom, what do you have to be able to do with your students to make the optimal piece for learning to happen? You guys are the quietest group I've ever had, I think. So what, we call it making connections, right? So as a classroom teacher, that if a kid can connect to us and we can connect to a child, then we really, a lot more learning can take place. And we now, with all the social emotional learning stuff, that we know how important it is for us to always know a child's story, because we know children are coming to you every day and they have their stories, right? Okay, and even, I mean, I've been teaching, so my story is I've been teaching for 28 years. I started and graduated from Texas Tech in 1981, and I got a degree as an elementary teacher, but I took reading classes, and so I'm considered, quote, a reading specialist is what I graduated from Texas Tech with a degree in. My first 2 years of teaching in Midland, Texas, 5th and then 6th grade, and what subjects did I teach? Math and science, and teaching and reading. And when I think back and reflect about my reading instruction that I got at Texas Tech, that time in the 80s, it was in the late 70s, whole language. I still remember my college classes and, reading a lot of novels, teen books. It was all about reading books and sharing books with kids. I don't remember anything about fonts, Zippo. And I remember we also made a lot of learning center games, having cute little colored file folders and making little games, that would go, stuff like that. That's what I remember about learning how to be a reading teacher and being, quote, a reading specialist. Then I go off to teach math and science. I taught sort of in a community like, most of my kids were Hispanic or African American, and I taught at the Title I schools, so for 2 years. So I taught 5th and 6th grade. Then I decided, I'm gonna move to the Pacific Northwest. So I moved to Seattle, greater Seattle area as a 25-year-old. It took about a year before I got a teaching job in the Lake Washington School District. And I came in mid-year, had a 5th, 6th grade combination class, and guess I got all the darlings that all the teachers did not want to have in their classroom. I got all of those cutie pies in one classroom, so I had 5th, 6th, and teaching all subjects to 5th and 6th graders, 2 grades worth of subjects. Still wasn't a really easy teaching job by any stretch of the means. And at that time, Madeline Hunter was very popular. So see, she's laughing, we're showing her age, the things that we've been through. So sort of what I just did with you guys by having an activity to sort of get your brain warmed up. And then, sort of saying our objective, we're gonna have a conversation today. That's my objective, is that we're having a conversation today. We're gonna cover the reading brain. We're gonna cover the 5 components. And then we're gonna end the day with a task, all right? So then that next year, I taught in the North Shore School District, and I taught in a program where parents had to donate 80 hours to the classroom teacher. It was really like a charter school within a public school setting in the North Shore School District. Taught second grade, I taught fourth grade for those guys for the 5 years that I was there. That was really a incredible experience because you would have all these parents in your classroom. It was sort of like, I wasn't married, but I'm thinking, oh my gosh, if you were ever married and had this mother-in-law in your kitchen all the time, that's sort of how you felt, you know, that, oh my gosh, I had all these mommies, you know, and all these mommies, it happened to be, this was when Microsoft was getting big, you know, so these are all people that moved from California, they're living in the big fancy houses in Woodinville, and they want a different experience for their kids, and their children called me by my first name, Lynn, and we got to go on whatever I wanted to study. I could take my kids to all of the great things in Seattle. So, you know, we had season tickets to the play, we went to the museum. It was whatever I thought, oh, I want the kids to learn this. You know, we didn't really have standards at that time per se, and we were sort of this alternative, sort of funky school. Did that for 5 years. And I really, you know, I can remember I taught reading pretty whole languagey. I mean, I wanted my kids to be writing, you know, we would make books and bind them and they would read them into a tape set recorder and take it home, and their parents would be so proud of them. And, you know, we did spelling homework, and then when I taught fourth grade, you know, we're reading novels and talking about stuff. But I don't really feel that I was teaching reading, and I had no professional development at all. Then I met this cute little Navy boy, and I moved to Whidbey Island. And my first job in Whidbey Island was third grade. Well, they had a third grade, they had a basal, and Oak Harbor had student learning objectives. And I can still remember we had a poem in the third grade basal, and this is sort of my first time ever to have a basal reader. And by this time, you know, I've taught 9, 10 years that I've never even had a basal, you know, or any structure in my classroom. So we had a basal, and there was a poem in that third grade basal about witchcraft. It was sort of cutesy. Well, we had a parent group that thought that the third grade teachers were teaching witchcraft, and that made, you know, King 5 News about the Oak Harbor School District and us third grade teachers teaching witchcraft, you know. So it was sort of an interesting experience. So I got pregnant, took a year off as a brand new mommy, you know, so I took a year off. Then I came back and I just job shared second grade for 2 years with another gal, and I taught the reading, and I remember being really, at that time, really into, you know, I loved having trade books in my room because I taught in a brand new school. We had the most beautiful library. I was always a teacher that her room was filled with beautiful trade books. I loved reading aloud to kids. I loved making sure, at that time I was sort of on this kick about sight words, making sure I knew how many sight words they knew and all of that. But still, had I had any training in reading instruction? Zip. Okay. Then I stayed home because I had my daughter, and so I was just a stay-at-home mom. Brandy happens to be at the school, Broadview Elementary, where my children went to school. My son was a fourth grader in Brandy's class. And remember the WASL? Any of you kids take the WASL, or were you guys MSP kids? But the WASL was the Washington Assessment of Student Learning. That's when all of a sudden we have these standards. Everybody's being driven. School districts are being measured by how well their kids do based off of standards, okay? And we took it in the fourth grade, and we took it in the seventh grade. So that fourth grade teacher really felt all eyes are watching who? That fourth grade and how they're doing. And then the fourth grade teacher will be like, you know, it's not all me, you know, because really where have they been in kindergarten, first, second, third grade? But so fourth grade, we have the WASL, we have these standards. So as a very active parent, just observing how teachers, the stress of what's happening to people and having these WASL to standardize. So then I go back to the classroom, probably almost 3 years after that first year of the WASL, and I wanted to teach fourth grade. I wanted to have that stress. I like having standards. I like knowing where you need to get children, and that drives me. I like having a roadmap. And so I learned, still no reading training, but as a fourth grade teacher, we had release items. You know, you could sort of see what those STEM questions were about. They were really getting kids, they needed to be able to do main idea, kids needed to summarize, kids needed to be able to predict, kids needed to be able to infer, they needed to write a short answer response. And I spent most of for the next 4 years teaching fourth graders was how to look at the questions, and then you go back into the text and you find the answers. Because where are the answers? Right there in the text. Now I want you to think about, if your mother were to use the words right there to you, how would she use the words right there to you? Or your father? What kind of a tone do you hear in your head when you hear the words right there? None of you had any parents that said it's right there?
Like annoying.
Annoying. I mean, how many of you with your spouse or significant other, it's right there? Where is it? It's right there. Okay. So we really taught kids that most of all the questions that they are asked are always right there in the text. So should we ever be giving children something to read and not allowing them to go back into the text to find the answers? When you start reflecting on your practice, does that make sense to have a kid read something and then you give them a pop quiz, but it's all based on what? If you can't go back to the text, what's everything sort of based on? Recall, your memory. When you take the SAT, the ACT, you take the WASL, you take the MSP, you take all those tests, is that how they're assessing you? No. They're assessing you by your ability to go back to the text and to reread it, and I always teach kids it's like a wrestling match. You might have to be on that mat for 20 minutes rereading it till you get the meaning that you need to get out of it. And that those answers are always right there. So we had lovely little colored pencils and highlighters, and teaching my kids to go back into that text. Oh, look, that answer's in paragraph 2. Look at it, it's right there. But teaching kids, your answers are right there. I go off to middle school and I'm teaching 6th grade, and by this time all of a sudden we switch from the WASL and we go, did any of you children take the MSP? So then we switched to the MSP, Measuring Student Progress. And I loved the MSP because they really had 11 reading targets, and it was, and I had those 11 reading targets posted right here. Every kid knew that main idea, inference, predicting, literary elements, text features, cause and effect, compare and contrast, that this is what our goals were, that we were learning how to do that and how to answer questions. And the kids then had to, at that time, they switched from doing paper and pencil, and they're doing it on the computer, all right? Then what happened in our district is that we had sort of some budget cuts, and there were 3 of us that were up in the middle school land that got deemed the most highly qualified to go back into elementary land. So I was one of those lucky people. So I get deemed to go to Crescent Harbor Elementary. It's one of our top poverty schools, and to be the title lab teacher. So I'm walking into having 10 paraeducators, never in my life have I managed paraeducators, walking into being responsible for kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, struggling readers. I remember meeting with Paula Seaman, and she says, nonsense word, phoneme segmentation, I'm like, I don't know what she is talking about. Dibbles, what in the world are we doing here? And that school was on autopilot about doing dibbles. Everybody would shut down every 3 weeks and do the progress monitoring, and we had these dibbles reports. And the basal was Storytown. Storytown had an intervention kit. So, I talk about a learning dump that year. Did I have a lot to learn? And I had a lot to learn on my own. Still, no professional development, you're just, and I had some stuff, so I can still remember that the book that I got was, I've dibbled, now what do I do? Because I was like, what is all of this stuff? I had no idea. Our district then got a grant, and for some reason I was one of those lucky people who get chosen to do things. There were 4 of us that were chosen to be the literacy coaches. and the core consortium. So they came in, and our district, we had 5 days of training through core with this book. And that's where I really learned about the 5 components of reading instruction. I still remember sitting there going, oh, 5 components, I don't know what that lady's talking about, you know, but we learned, and it was all elementary teachers, but I was selected to be a coach, so my job was to learn this, and then my job was to go into classrooms and to do model lessons for people. I spent 2 years, but I learned so much. I'm a learner. I like learning new things, and I especially like learning new things and I see the difference that it makes for kids, okay? And I think the biggest takeaway from this was about syllable types. I didn't know there were 6 syllables. Some people argue there's 7, but anyway, there are 6 syllables, okay? So learn that and all this stuff. So we spent 2 years as a district. You know, we ran PLCs, we read, you know, we dove into this book. So today, I'm giving you a 4-hour where we took 5 full days to do this book, to get everybody up to speed on the 5 pillars, because all this stuff is based off the National Reading Panel in the year 2000. So when did I get my teaching degree in reading? 1981. There's a lot that's happened in the world, and so in the year 2000, there was a national panel of reading that came together, and that's all of this stuff. When you get out and you start looking in all my young people about your schools, did they train you in the 5 components of reading instruction? There's a lot of stuff out there saying no, that you have not been given the necessary skills to understand reading instruction. Maybe some of you have been blessed and you were at a university and you got the training. And then, so I spent 2 years embracing myself, and we call it the Barney book because it's purple, it's bad, it's heavy, it's not something you want to carry around a lot. My first one is like in pieces. This is my second order of this book. So I did that for 2 years. Then I go and I'm back being the Broadview teacher. So who am I teaching with at Broadview? Mrs. Ross. Mrs. Ross was my son's teacher. She was my daughter's teacher. My kids are getting ready to be 27 and 29. They will both tell you Mrs. Ross was the best teacher they ever had. And they had her for 4th and 5th grade. And the things that they learned from Mrs. Ross were the things that carried them through, you know, through middle school, high school, and college. Millie would love to write papers because Mrs. Ross taught her an outline. At UW, it was no big deal to sit down, bring it on, you know, I'm going to write this paper. She remembers exactly what Brandy taught her. My son was more of a math kid, Brandy and the math. So anyway, so my relationship with Brandy. So I come back and I'm teaching, walk into a title lap room, and the year before, the teacher had ordered all that leveled literacy stuff. So I walk in, my room is filled with all these boxes, 0 training again, but with leveled literacy, what happens, they come with these lovely DVDs. So I said it was my mini Friday nights, eating wine or drinking wine and having popcorn and watching the DVDs of leveled literacy to learn how to do that program. And then I always get pegged, okay, Lynn, you go out now, you have to train everybody. So I spent 4 years training anybody in our district that was new to leveled literacy intervention. I'm going to be honest, I'm one of those systems people. I like organization, and I'm going to figure out how to do something. And through my 6 years of doing leveled literacy and just working with struggling readers and working with my paraeducator team, I saw magic happen. And I think one of the reasons why I loved leveled literacy so much was the quality of the books. So how many of you are doing leveled literacy and have been exposed to the beautiful quality of the books? Do I have any, aren't the books to die for? And the kids, and do the kids love the books? Yes. So for me, that's like, okay. But now, when I became that leveled literacy instructor, what did I have that I didn't have the rest of my career? I had the training and the knowledge of the 5 components of reading instructions, plus I had that Dibbles measurement. Those things really guided me as I was doing leveled literacy and then keeping my paras informed on all of good reading instruction. Does that make sense? So last year, I retired. If you would have told me last year at this time I would be in Mattawa once a month, starting in August, I would have said, what are you talking about? I don't even know where Mattawa is. But Brandy came over because she wanted Missy, and she just felt that you guys needed some support, and she wanted to have a reading lab like what we had. And she knew that I had seen our kids made tremendous growth at our school, and all of our schools do it. And the schools that really operate with strong fidelity and have good systems, you see this kind of growth. I mean, you just do. And so Brandy said, hey, will you come over? So I came over in August to help set up. I came over in September, October, November. And then in December, they're like, oh, would you come over with Saddle Mountain? Would you do a little of those 5 components of reading instruction? I'm like, okay, sure. Okay. Now, I don't represent any company. I am just Lynn Goebel, retired teacher, who's walking and sharing my experiences. Because as I continue to read constantly about reading instruction, what I know that I have over, some of those people that write all those articles, I have the experience. I mean, and right now you're working with kids. You're watching them, you're observing them. And so that makes a difference. And so I'm hoping that as we talk through, you're gonna watch a video about the reading brain, and then the 5 components are here: phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. That you're going to, what I want you to do as we do the PowerPoint, is I'm gonna make you write down in that second sheet why it matters, and then once we finish each of those pillars, after each one, I'm gonna make you respond. What kind of connections are you making to what you're using to teach reading? So I put ready, Jen, not realizing I would have you, but yet you're using LLI. So as we learn about these 5 components, I want you to just to be more reflective about how you can see that connection with level literacy and what you're gonna do. No program is perfect. The most important thing is you as the instructor. You're the one, you're the toolbox, you're the one that's guiding the instruction. If we think programs are gonna solve all of our issues, no. Programs are great, curriculum is wonderful to have, but it's the instructing and it's your knowledge of reading instruction that's going to make the difference. Does that make sense? Okay, so now I need you guys, so I need to understand your story. But are there any questions about my story? You sort of have a feeling you know who this crazy Lynn Goebel is from Whidbey Island and why I'm here, okay? I don't represent these guys, I don't represent anybody. I'm just a retired teacher that you're my duo, okay? You're my redo for the kids that I taught for so long and I had no instruction about reading. Okay, so you're my redo, all right? Okay, so I'm gonna start here. All right, Sweet Pea, I'm gonna have you go first. So tell me your name and then sort of tell me what your role is as a reading teacher so I sort of get an idea.
Okay, so I'm Flor Fernandez.
Okay.
And I teach 2nd grade math, science, and we do some writing in there. And,
Are you a teacher, certified
Yes.
teacher? Yes, okay, but you don't teach, so do you work with, who was the one that said, no, it was you 2 swap. So is that what happens, you guys
Yeah.
swap? But you teach science?
science, some writing and math.
Okay.
But there's reading and math as well.
I'm getting ready to say, you know what, here's my pet peeve. Every teacher is a reading teacher till that kid graduates from
Yes.
12th grade. Because you have to read in science, do you have to read in math?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, do you have to do a lot of reading
Yes.
in math? Yes, absolutely. And then, okay, oh, keep on, okay, yes,
I'm also same as for 2nd grade teacher at my elementary.
okay,
I teach math, science, and writing.
okay, so, Beck, especially 2nd grade, when we're talking, what are we learning in 2nd grade? We're learning how to read.
And with word problems, we do a lot of word problems right now, so we do the 3 reads, and they're doing a lot of reading all the time.
Right, and finding those keywords, what are the most important details, and when you read math, you sort of read it like this, you go all over, you've got text features, very critical type of reading, yes, okay. So you're my 2nd grade team.
Yeah, I'm Kyla and I switch with Flor. I teach reading, writing, and then social studies.
Okay, so you are really all of you, I want you to feel the pressure on about reading instruction, okay? Especially second grade. It's like this, before we go to third, when we're supposed to be reading to learn. Okay, over here.
First grade, comprehensive.
Okay, all right, and,
First grade, sitting in for the last couple of weeks.
and I saw you made a lot of connections because you've been around, right?
Yeah,
So
I
those
know
of us
that
that have been
purple book.
around.
I know that purple book.
Yes.
I have it,
Yeah.
mine has a white cover.
Oh, okay, so there you go. So,
Different edition.
yes, okay, but yes, okay, that heavy book, yes.
My name is Masal. I'm a parapro.
And
And
thank
then
you.
I
And what,
walk in and help out teachers.
in what grade do you walk in and help out teachers?
Kinder, first, and second.
So are you doing reading instruction at all? Okay, okay, so you are. And what materials are you using?
LI and then the RGR.
RGR, okay, so sort of both, okay, fabulous. And RGR, so we get the impression, is really heavy phonics based. It's
Yeah.
really teaching all those phonics rules, and then you have those beautiful books that,
Yeah.
okay, let's see.
Anna, the music teacher.
Oh, Anna, oh my goodness. So music, and I still remember one of my classes was music and reading. There is so much about, you reading the words of music. I used to always, in my day, thought that was so cute, by, having a CD and reading the Big Big Beluga and singing those songs and making the kids, follow the words and in the day by reading. But a lot of reading happens in music.
Yeah, and then I'm doing the little half-hour lab.
Okay,
First grade.
and are you enjoying it? Not yet. It's okay to be honest, you're in a safe environment, so this just helps
Well,
you know.
just because I've never had reading
Okay.
class in my whole life.
But I want you to sort of think, music, I have no musical talents, but yet music is all about a code and breaking that code to know those notes and those pitches and the sounds. It's the same thing about learning, in a way, to me, learning your 26 letters of your alphabet, and those letters, we have sounds. So it's sort of like, to me, it's sort of the same. I could really see a connection there, okay? All right.
Hi, I'm Danny. I
Hi,
teach
Danny.
Kindergarten.
Yes,
so
I've
I
seen you
teach
with your
those
babies.
Little creatures, how to be
Yes.
humans.
Yes. How to be human?
Yeah.
Yes.
I pretty much do it all.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think, okay, it is, yeah, and it's like herding little kittens. I mean, kindergarten teachers really, little kittens, and then they turn into cats, hopefully.
Eventually.
Or I guess, yeah, or maybe puppies and dogs, because dogs follow directions better, I don't know. But it is, little bodies, and coming to this big old place and learning how to be a student. I always call it being a student, it's really important.
Jose, I teach PE and then 30 minutes in the reading lab.
Okay, all right. So do you see why, I'm hoping that we're building our little, because we're gonna be together today, that you guys sort of know where I'm coming from, and now I sort of know I've got really two novice, you guys haven't had any, okay? Give me a thumbs up if have had any training in reading instruction. So fabulous, what has been your training in reading instruction? What
I
did you?
have a literacy degree.
So did they teach you all the 5 components?
I'm sure they did, but it's been about 10 years, so.
So, right, so like, maybe they
Yeah.
taught me phonics, but yet those 5 components,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure once you start talking about it, it'll come back.
It'll
but
come
it's
back to
been
you,
a while.
okay, so yeah, all right, hi Sweet Pea, are you joining us?
I am.
Okay, here we go, we had a pop quiz, so you're gonna have to just sort of stay with us, but do you have a pencil?
No.
Oh, you poor child, okay, who's got a pencil?
You're
All
right.
right, okay, so he came late and he doesn't have a pencil, oh my goodness, but see how kind of nice, hey, so I'm Lynn Goble, and I am just, who can tell them about me? Let's see how well they've been listening, then we'll get started, because I'm really big about making connections. Who can give my connection to this gentleman?
Graduated in 1981 from Texas College.
Yeah,
No reading, the literacy degree.
with a literacy degree.
Teaching for 20 years?
28 years.
Do I need to write this down?
No. Been teaching
Just
28
making
years,
sure.
and now I'm retired. And Mrs. Ross and I were colleagues together, and Mrs. Ross was my children's fourth and fifth grade teachers. So my kids are getting ready to be 29 and 27. All right, and I don't represent any company, I am just Lynn Goebel from Whidbey Island, who feels very passionate about reading instruction, and I know what happens and what can happen to you if you have some good instruction and moving forward. Okay, all right, here we go.
What school at North Shore were you at?
I was North Shore, I was at C.O. Sorensen, do you know where downtown Woodinville is? Oh, you do? And you know that red big building?
Yeah.
Yes, I taught in that red big building, and it was the coolest place ever to teach as a young person, because I'm a bicycle rider, still ride bikes, but, I would take my bike and I could ride into the slough into, you know, like UW, or you could ride into Redmond. So I sort of felt like a kid. I grew up in West Texas, not a very pretty place, and so moving to the Pacific Northwest, I love where I live. I mean, I love Washington State. I feel very thankful every day that I get to call this home. And I am falling in love with Mattawa. It's so peaceful, other than the Bellevue traffic, but just to drive over here and see the beauty, and then the drive home, you know, the last time was glorious with Mount Rainier, looking at it, you know, and stuff like that. So I have not had to do with any of the bad traffic. Okay, and then young man, I need to know, what do you teach? Because I'm really big about, with your students, we know that kids, if kids know your story and you can make connection, and you know kids' story, then I know great learning happens when we make connection. So right now, I'm trying to make my connection and hopefully warm up your brains that this stuff I'm gonna tell you, you're not gonna sit here and go, oh, what a waste of time. What was my principal thinking? Because we all do that. We don't like our time to be wasted at all. And I don't wanna waste your time. Okay.
I'm a one-on-one sped para,
Oh, you're a sped parent, so who are you working with?
little first grader,
It-
7-year-old.
7-year-old, and so are you doing reading instruction?
Yeah, for about a half hour a day, but amongst other,
Amongst other things, okay, and so are you using leveled literacy intervention?
yeah.
Okay, and so did somebody sort of train you at all yet? Okay, we'll talk later.
We'll see,
Okay,
yeah.
We'll see, okay, alright, so I want you to sort of know that what I'm giving you today, how many of you know if I say the word schema, it's not a skin disease, if I say schema, what am I talking about? Schema is your prior knowledge, it's what you know, your schema. And so, when you have prior knowledge, what happens, it makes you, that you're able to learn. I mean, that's how all learning happens. You have to have sort of knowledge, prior knowledge, and then you add on to that. So I'm hoping that our conversation about the 5 components of reading instruction is gonna add to your schema about teaching reading. Hi, my kindergarten teacher, did they come already?
What is it? One will be on her way in a bit.
Okay, so did
Yeah,
they
'cause
visit
when-
your room?
Yeah, they already went to visit. my
Okay,
room,
so you guys, you're okay, and you all
Yes.
survived?
Yes.
Okay. And then,
Yeah.
okay, well then I'll give you one
Kinda.
other little story before I go on.
Okay.
So I retired in June, and so now I am an elected school board member. I decided to run for school board. So I, am on the school board, but when I went to my WASDA training, who do you think I sat and had lunch with on my first day? All of the Mattawa school board people and your superintendent. So it was sort of crazy to think of all the places I could have sat down that day. Who did I sit down with? Mattawa. And then I was just in Olympia, and who should be sitting in front of me? Bob. So it's just like I tap Bob on the shoulder, I go, Bob, it's that crazy lady from Whidbey Island. I'm gonna be in your school district next week. So and I saw Jesse from afar, but I have my new Mattawa connection.
Jesse's my brother.
Oh, Jesse's your brother. Okay, so I sat with Jesse, so it was just hilarious. I'm like, oh my gosh, who in their wildest mind would have thought? Because we walked in late, and you know the lady's flagging you down with a fluorescent light, and we sit down, and somebody had a UW connection, and so then and I'm like, oh my gosh, started the connection. So I know your brother, and then Jesse and I, the last class of the training, he and I sat with each other. So I'm learning all that school board stuff too. So can you tell, who do you think I care about? Kids. And who else do I care about? If I care about kids, who am I caring about? You guys, okay? This is hard work. Most people, I don't think most people can do what you guys do. I know they can't. So you guys are magical, and I'm very proud of you, and it's an honor to be here to be able to hopefully, my goal is that I do something that makes you get excited about what you have to do. Does that make sense? Okay, are we ready? Okay,
Yes.
my name is Lynn. All right. Okay, so we know our stories. All right. Now, why does it have that? Okay, good. Okay, so the ladder of reading. Has anybody seen this? Okay, so I want you to, what this means is how we teach reading instruction. 5% of the children in the United States can read without any effort. How many of you, when you've been doing the dibbles, or you can see you have kids sit in front of you, they can read 135 words per minute, and then you have the other kid who can read like 10. I mean, it's just amazing to think how the brain works. So 5% of our kids, they don't need any instruction. They're probably one of those good whole language kids, you just have a beautiful book. 35% of our kids learning to read is easy with some broad instruction. 40 to 50% of our kids need an explicit, I want you to pay attention to that word, explicit, systematic, and sequential instruction. That's 40 to 50% of our kids need that type of reading instruction. And then 10 to 15% of our kids are dyslexic and really require a little bit more different type of instruction. This one, there's a lot of conversation going on in the world. Oh, I can touch the board and it'll do that? Well, going on about dyslexia. You're gonna, your school district, there's laws and all this kind of stuff. And so that DIBELS 8 is considered a pre-screener for dyslexia. So, but just know. Okay, now we are going to look at the reading brain. How many of you know how many parts of the brain that a child has to access to be able to read? Well, look at that. Well, really, it's sort of 3, but that crisscross. Okay. Then I think they have 5 up here, but what they're trying to show, oh my gosh, I'm going to be tripping, is that a reader has to access sort of this part of the brain, and that part of their brain to be able to decode, because they have to be able to look at a letter. That letter has to be able to make a sound, right? Then you blend those sounds together to make a word. So when you're reading, you're really having a conversation in your head, correct? About the words. But now if you can't decode those letters with that sound, and then you can't decode a word, is reading going to happen? No. So we're going to watch this YouTube. So this is where my tech friends, let's see, that I want you to watch this gentleman as he really talks about, because there is so much research about now the brain and what we can see and the fact that you have to access. All right. And we're in Paris.
This child is learning to read. He's trying to rewire areas in his brain so it can turn shapes of letters on paper into sounds and words of spoken language. Actually, his teacher might not always be helping him, because one common way of teaching probably just makes it harder to learn to read. Stanislas Dehaene knows this. He won the Brain Prize in 2014. He studies how reading takes place in the brain. He is a professor at Collège de France and the leader of INSERM CEA's Cognitive Neuroimaging Center in Saclay, south of Paris. These laboratories are called NeuroSpin.
In my lab, we are specializing in analyzing the functions of the human brain, and especially the higher level functions such as reading, language, mathematics, number processing, consciousness.
Watching the brain at work requires finely tuned precision scanning instruments. as well as very carefully designed experiments if you want to make sure you're actually studying a certain function of the brain. This means the scientists in Diane's laboratory, in order to see how the brain reads, might construct a whole hierarchy of stimuli, ranging from real words all the way down to pseudo words, or even pseudo letters that look like letters but are meaningless symbols in any alphabet.
In this way, we can isolate some of the brain processes by subtraction. We ask, what difference does it make if it's a word? What difference does it make if it's pronounceable? Where in the brain is a specific process going on?
So what actually happens in the brain when it reads, and what implications should it have for how reading should be taught? It turns out our brains build on the circuits we train when we absorb spoken language. In other words, to grasp the alphabet, the brain first must learn to speak. That is easy for a child. Over millions of years, evolution has hardwired the human brain structures for that purpose. We don't need to go to school to learn to speak. All we need is to experience a language. But evolution has never shaped the brain to read. No brain structures have been developed through evolution to make sense of letters and written words.
We were never born in order to learn to read. It's an invention, it's very recent. What we do is we recycle some of the circuits of the ventral visual cortex. Some of these circuits are specialized for faces, for instance, but we turn them into circuits for recognizing letters and bringing this information about letters to the same exact circuit that is being used for spoken language. They know about the pronunciation of the word. And especially when you're a beginner reader, the challenge of reading is to turn the letters into sound.
So that's what this child's brain is struggling with, turning symbols on paper into sounds. Sounds that make sense because they are part of spoken language. But until he masters this conversion, he cannot focus on the meaning of the word.
Now, as you become an expert reader, you become faster and faster in doing this conversion. You begin to be able to do it for an entire set of letters all at once, in parallel. So you no longer have the feeling that you're doing this slow conversion, but it's still going on in your head.
These are findings that have implications for teaching all over the world, because many children are trained to recognize whole words when they learn to read. That might not help the child at all.
Well, there is a debate in the education literature about how to teach reading. There is this idea that maybe you just need to expose children to whole words or even whole sentences, and they will absorb the reading system. We know it's not the case, and we know now that it's the other way, the explicit teaching of correspondences between graphemes and phonemes, between letters and sounds, which is the right way to teach reading, because this is the way to teach explicitly those circuits going directly from vision to spoken language. This is the preferred route for the brain. If you don't do that, if you draw attention to the whole word, there are experiments showing that you are teaching another circuit, much more in the right hemisphere, which is, the opposite side of the brain.
Then you're not training the brain to read. The discovery of how the brain learns to read is an example of how scientific measurements of the brain can lead to better understanding of psychological processes like reading, mathematics, and other functions of consciousness. And it turns out, even mathematics can be taught in ways the brain finds more or less natural. This was clear to Stanislas Dehaene decades ago.
So in the case of mathematics, we've also found that there is another area of the brain, I can show you, it's exactly here in the interparietal circuits, that exist for a long time in evolution, exist in a monkey, and are caring about number and space and time, and they give us a sort of foundation for the concept of mathematics. I think there are some implications of what we found in mathematics for education. It should not be taught in the abstract, but it should reconnect to those basic intuitions that we find in young children, in babies, and even in non-human primates.
More than 100 years ago, the Eiffel Tower was erected in Paris as a celebration of the wonders of natural science, engineering, and the era of industry. Today, we live at the brim of another important era, the era of the brain. In the next century, finer and finer instruments might allow neuroscientists to uncover how the brain works. Not only reading or other relatively simple functions, but also how our sense of awareness arises from the chemistry and electrical signals deep in our brains.
My hope is that we'll soon have a theory for how to bridge the neural level to the psychological level. Right now we have a huge separation between psychological studies on the one hand and neuroscience studies. And my goal in life is really to bring these two together, create all of the bridges and the theories, the mathematics also, that will allow us to understand how groups of neurons, just flesh, is able to create thought, mental imaging. That is really the challenge of our field.
Turn to your neighbors and talk about what you thought about that. I get this ready. Was that at all interesting, or am I just really that nerdy that I find that interesting? Was that sort of interesting? Did it make you sort of be a little bit more reflective about the brain?
Yeah, and just how, what is it? Some kids learn quick, some just don't, because of all of these parts that are having to.
Oh,
just
right,
make a
some
connection.
kids need 1,000 swipes
Yeah.
before that really stays, that automaticity, that they're able to pull it out, you know, and so it just means you do it over and over and over. But the fact that you have 3 parts for their little brains to make all of that
Makes sense of
connecting.
all that.
Okay. Any comments that anybody's willing to share before I move on to the next slide? I encourage you, do some reading, do some Googling, checking, you know, a lot of this stuff you'll find on Reading Rockets, different things, but I think that what you're gonna hear is that science behind how children learn how to read in that brain. And so we will know that some kids need 1,000 swipes before you build that automaticity, that when they see things that they can make that. But that auditory processing and building those wires so they look at letters and know the relationship between sounds and letters are critical. Okay, so now the simple view of reading. Did you, I'm gonna give, look at your definition that you wrote for reading. Would everybody find, I asked questions, sort of, what was your definition, what is reading? It's a complicated thing, but what is reading? So reading involves language comprehension. You have to have background knowledge, vocabulary knowledge, language structure, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. We sort of talk about that being the language comprehension. Then you've got word recognition down here. Your phonological awareness, your decoding and spelling, your sight recognition. So this is Scarborough Rope. It was since 2001 talking about that these things weave together, that reading is really a multifaceted skill that gradually acquires years of instruction and practice, all right? Skill reading, fluent execution, and coordination of word recognition and comprehension of text, okay? So that's sort of a big mouthful about what do we call reading. Now I'm going to give you the simple view of what, when we say reading, what are we talking about? Okay, so the first thing, you need to be able to convert words into speech, right? When a child looks down, you look down, you read something, what are you doing? You're taking those words and they come speech in the head, correct? And you need to understand that speech. So you have to be able to decode the text, you have to comprehend the text to gain meaning. So that is what reading instruction is. So as primary teachers, You are teaching kids how to read, and this is what your goal is. So if you can't look at those symbols, and you can't put a sound to them, and you can't decode them, you can't come up with the word, right? How many of you, struggling readers, the biggest thing, they look at a word and I can't figure out this word, or this word's a, little kid. So give me an example of a word your kids might not know. Okay. So, okay. Cat, rabbit, okay, but to be able to, they have to be able to
Because they don't even
look
know
at
what
those
B or
letters
B
and
is.
sound them out. Now, read this, and I want you to tell me what this paragraph's about, because you guys can read all of that. Talk with table. What do you think that paragraph's talking about?
Cricket.
Yeah,
Sort of cricket. Okay, and what were your clues? You guys.
Somebody showed this to me before.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so you knew it because somebody told you, but if not, would you have known it? And I was hoping my PE guy probably, because he's probably played cricket. No, but
Seen it.
you've seen it. So what were the words that made you sort of think that could be cricket?
We're talking about balls,
Uh-huh.
boundary, 2-4, some score.
So it couldn't have been tennis or pickleball.
No.
It'd have to be cricket. Okay, but do you see that your knowledge of those words, you have to understand the vocabulary that you could understand what I'm talking about, right? Okay, so just to make sure everybody knows, and I want you always to be bringing this back when you're thinking about how you're teaching the students in your classroom how to read. All right, so in 2001, we came with the 5 pillars of reading instruction. Were you able to answer that question? I had that as a question, right? What are the 5 pillars of reading instruction? They are, we know that all reading instruction requires phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. So would you make sure that you write that down? We're going to use this document when I meet with you as groups. So this is sort of our notes, and to be able to come back and have a discussion. All right. How many of you knew those? Okay. All right, but I didn't know them until I had a training. Okay, but this is really important to know. Did you know your Ready Gen is organized around this information? And we'll talk a little bit about that, but your Ready Gen is organized. Okay, so everybody has those down? All right. Okay, so what is phonemic awareness? Phonemic awareness has nothing to do, you don't have letters in front of you, it's your ability to hear sounds. How many phonemes do we have in our English language? 44. Some people argue that we have 47, but what that means, we have 44 to 47 sounds in our English language. All right? So it's the ability to hear. And when we're doing DIBELS, what test are we using in DIBELS to check children's phonemic awareness? The phoneme segmentation, and we'll come back to that. Does everybody? Phoneme segmentation. So for our people who are not reading teachers that are doing LOI, this is going to be great for you guys to hear this. Okay, so phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness, so here's what I want you to write notes. So on that sheet where I talk that I have, why it matters. Phonemic awareness is the strongest predictor of long-term reading success. I need you to write that down. It's critical. I just read an article even talking about why phonemic awareness is really important for our big kids to be practicing that skill. And that's that auditory processing, being able to hear the sounds. Phonemic awareness. Okay. also, we're gonna talk about some examples of phonemic awareness. And my kindergarten teachers are probably your experts, because kindergarten, first grade is filled with, should be in your Ready Gen, but with phonemic awareness activities. And my people that are not, this is gonna be fun for you to learn about what phonemic awareness is. And why is it important to know that skill? Did everybody get a chance to copy that? All right, so phonemic awareness. So sound and word discrimination. So if I say cat, mat, bat, ran, which one doesn't go in there? Ran. What's the what sound? What's the ending sound? The okay. Now rhyming words. How many of you? It's hard to teach kids rhyming. It is, isn't it? It's hard to teach kids rhyming. All right. But at that they start hearing syllable splitting. We have words that are going are syllable splitting. The onset rhyme going and at. The blending words together. So if I say, so your blending and phoneme segmentation are your two strongest phonemic awareness activities that you get the biggest bang for your buck with little kids. So let's do tat. Let's put the sounds together. When I say at, what word did I make? Okay, let's do b at. Let's do fox. Okay, so let's excuse me, I should have gone. I want you to phoneme segment. Fox, go. How many sounds does X make? X makes 2 sounds. Okay, now why do you think being able to blend sounds and segment sounds, what skill do you think that leads into for kids? What skill would that lead into? If you were
Decoding.
What?
Decoding.
What else does it lead into? If I'm on my paper, I want you right now, would you please spell the word big for me? I want you to pop the sounds before you write it. B-I-G. Would you please write big for me down your paper? B-I-G. All of you, okay? I know that's just fun. Okay, but why do we want to learn practice phoneme segmentation and blending? Because it leads to what skill? Writing. And what is writing and reading are what? Reciprocal of each other. So when you're in the lunch line, wherever you are, can you be practicing phoneme awareness activities? And if I say cat and I want to change the k to a b, what word did we just make? Okay. If I want to change bat and I want to drop off the ending sound and put a n, what word did I make? Fan. Okay. So it's constantly doing phonemic awareness activities with your kids, all right? And so those of you that are teaching LLI, when you read a story or before you read a story, you can look at that lovely little book and you're going to have the word dog. All right, everybody, let's pop the word dog. Okay, get your hands up. We always like to have them use their hands. Or some people like to use, like blocks and stuff like that. Let's pop the sounds in dog. D, g. Okay, let's pop the sounds in ship. Sh, it. Okay, you can do, like I just saw the ladies back here, kindergarten teachers add on. Kids like doing it here, you do this, but yet this is so important to have some kind of a, when you're doing phoneme segmentation, what is it nice to have to go along with? The movement, okay, things like that. Kindergarten teachers, do you guys want to add anything about phonemic awareness to this right now?
I do it all the time.
You do, don't you?
I do it during transition anytime that I can because, some kids need it. Some kids don't hear that initial sound or they don't hear the ending sound, or when I'm having them write it, it's like they only hear the ending, they don't hear the beginning. So it's like constant practice.
It's nonstop.
Yeah.
But are you giving your kids a gift? Because what do we know is the number one determinant for reading success is their ability for phonemic awareness. And if you're not practicing it and doing it all day long, and what's the other part to our teaching that we always have to ensure that we try to make it what? engaging. It has to be engaging. And do kids have fun? Do kids enjoy phonemic awareness
Yeah.
activities in your classroom?
Yeah.
Yeah, they do. And some kids, it's amazing because their little brains can hear that. Other little kids, they don't know what you're talking about. And so music teacher, that's sort of like you teaching kids how to sing and song and to go up the ladder and hear and stuff like that. There's some of us out in the world, our brains don't operate that way. I mean, we don't hear those sounds. And so we always think that I'm helping kids to train the brain to hear those sounds or hear those notes. We're rewiring their brain. Are there any of these that you do not understand at all? Does that look pretty? Okay, and my friends that are doing LOI, that when you're working with kids, that you want to be consciously aware, how am I incorporating phonemic awareness? Because the structure of your lesson does phonics, and then they read and they reread and you talk, but you can incorporate this now, understanding this in your toolbox, phonemic awareness, that I'm going to have kids popping the sounds and they're practicing in their classroom, that this won't be something new, but I need you to think about how you can incorporate it. Okay, my people that are teaching like math and science, how can you incorporate phonemic awareness into your daily routines? Are there things that you guys can be doing?
Use it as a transition.
Transition, what else? See, to me, when you're sitting down, you're doing writing, you're doing shared writing, all that kind of stuff, even though you're adding the letters, but before you add the letters, what are you doing? You're popping those sounds so those kids hear those sounds and then they put them together. But your transitions, but in your writing, that you are paying attention, you're looking at your science words before, you teach vocabulary words. Have you taken that and broken those words into their sounds so they're hearing those sounds, because everything is based off of sounds, those letters and those sounds that those words make. Okay, the next one is phonics. What's the difference between phonemic awareness and phonics? Does anybody know? Phonics is where you put the letters to it. So the ability to understand that there's a predictable relationship between phonemes and sounds. And what are graphemes? That was one of your words. What are they? Those are the letters that represent the sound. So how many letters do we have in our alphabet? 26. But how many phonemes do we have? 44. Who in the world thought of that? Do you know how complicated our language is? Extremely. So phonics is so important, and that's why there's so much stuff out there that people are talking about, because they think you as teachers are not teaching your phonics explicitly, and it's sequential. And so now that's why we have all these state rules, and there's all this stuff is going on, and the arguing is all over the phonics instruction. But you have to think, phonics is where I'm teaching kids to decode. I wished I would have known why my spelling program was so important, because why do we teach kids spelling? What is spelling? It's the phonics. What's your favorite phonics rule that you repeat over and over when you work with kids, especially struggling readers? What's your phonics rule? Do you guys know phonics rules? What's your phonics rule?
I liked it when two vowels go walking, because I would sing the song from the video, and I don't get to do it now, but in first grade they'd be like, how do you spell boat? And I'd be like, when two vowels go walking, the first one does the talking, and both you hear the O but not the A.
So there we go. So what do we have?
Whatever word they want to say, and I do that in Aaliyah last year.
See, and I love those primary teachers that can sing, music teachers.
Yeah,
I can
I'm
never
not
get you
getting
to
there.
save my life. Okay, so what do we know? That rule. When two vowels go walking, usually the first vowel says its name. So when you're writing, are we always constantly teaching phonics? Okay, you want to teach that. What's the other rule that you know? Oh, the boss E, magic E, what's silent E? Oh my gosh, do you get a ton of mileage out of that rule? Oh my goodness, does everybody know the boss E rule? My people that don't teach reading, do you guys know the boss E rule? Okay, sweet peas. So,
You're about to just get your mind blown right now.
okay, so look at this. Okay, let's pop the sounds in lake. Let's pop it. L, A. How many sounds do we hear?
3.
3. But oh my goodness, how do we spell lake? L-A-K-E. Because what do we have here? We have a bossy E. A bossy E makes a vowel say its name. First grade, kindergarten, second grade. Those two vowels walk together, and that bossy E are probably the most important phonics rules you repeat over and over and over. Because what do we know about our little darlings? They don't know it. And how are they going to learn it if you don't what? Explicitly teach that, and you're constantly saying the same thing. That's one thing about being a teacher. Do we say the same thing every single day? Raise your hand if you feel like you say the same thing every single day. Yes, because you have to. That's what you're doing. You're saying the same thing every day. All right, but that's okay. Does everybody follow? Okay, any other rules? Those are about my 2 favorite. But are there a whole list of phonics rules? Yes. Okay, and usually why you teach spelling is because you're teaching patterns. And spelling teaches kids those spelling patterns and how then they can decode and how they can spell. Why it matters. Would you please jot it down? Why it matters. Phonics is so important. And you guys have this RG, right? I'm saying it right. RG. So your RG is pretty much, isn't it all phonics based? Am I correct? Give me a nod. RG. RG people. Yeah? RGR. Okay. All right. And that sort of was your program before you did Ready Gen, but you guys are still using RGR, right? Okay. So it's heavily phonics. So my LLI people, you're part of the structure of your lesson is that phonics, right? And you're looking that it has a phonics rule. Are you guys using are you reading the lesson guides? Do you have the lesson guides as you teach it? So just know that you guys reread and then you do phonics. And so when you're doing phonics, you think about that you're teaching a kid how to have the tools to decode text. It's not something you ignore. You need to do it. And you sort of look at, they have it in the, it's sort of bold and it's black, and it just sort of tells you this is the phonics rule that you're teaching, and then you practice it with the kids. Very important. Everybody have that? Okay. Now, these are, I just called them routines, rules, strategy. Elkonin boxes with letters. Does anybody know what in the world I'm talking about when I say Elkonin boxes? So you can do this when you're working with kids. You can either do it by sounds or by spelling. Okay? So this is an Elkonin box. So let's spell the word, let's pop the sounds in the word sit. Hands up. It. Okay, now I'm going to do, because I'm going to do, making it more the phonics part, because I'm putting on. What was the first sound? What letter makes that sound? S. What was my middle sound? It. What letter makes that sound? It. What was my ending sound? Okay. All right. So what do we got? Let's, our hands. It. Now, I want you to know, it really is about being explicit and having, quickly doing these kind of little activities. I'll call them, but my hand going, okay, it, what's the word? Sit. Okay. Now, when I want to, I can still do, I'm still calling this by sounds. Let's do the word dad. Pop the sounds. Okay. What was the first sound we heard? What's the letter that makes that sound? Okay. Inside, what letter? Okay, my last one. Okay, so this is all sounds. Now, if I want to do it, another sound. So let's do the word make. Pop the sounds and make. Okay, what's my first? What letter? Do you see how I'm constant, you guys? I'm just treating you like the students, but see how it's constant sound letter that I'm saying the same thing over and over. Okay, what's my next sound? A. What was my last sound? And sort of with k, you have to teach kids, there's 2 letters that make the k, you know? But we're going to do the K. Oh my goodness. If you look at that, does that say? What does that say? But guess what? I know it needs that what? Magic E, bossy, silent E. Okay, so if I'm just doing sounds, but then you could draw it like this and go, oh my goodness. This word has 4 letters, but it only has 3 sounds. Okay? And so that you can work with kids doing it that way. Does that make sense? But yet what you're teaching kids is those sounds, those letters. And then we have those tricky words with those magic E's. And so I'm going to, that it's M-A-K-E. All right? Okay.
So I have a question about
Yes.
that. So last week in my LLI lesson, they had me use an
Elkonin boxes?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But they were sight words like go and to. And I guess, yeah, so that should have been more like phonemic awareness where they just hear it, but they were having me write it
Well,
down.
they just wanted you to do go like this.
Yeah, and then have the kids tell me the sounds. And I was like, but those are sight words. We shouldn't be having the kids sound those words out.
Well, I guess sometimes you have to use professional judgment. I guess I would
I
need to
just
look at that.
figured that
I don't remember encountering that.
Lesson 37 in orange.
Okay, so I'll go back and I'll look at to see exactly what they were trying to get you to do.
Go, me.
Well,
and
maybe
the
because really
sound.
those are open syllables, you know, in a way. But yet but you're having the sound. So
Yeah.
what sound do you hear in go? Go. Oh. What sound do you hear in me? M. E. What sound do you hear in toot? Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's hearing those sounds.
Right.
Okay, so it's not. This isn't going to be a
After I
silence.
did the go, I just ended up doing the rest of them phonetically because I was like, that's not.
Well, but yet you can do them in the Elkonin boxes.
Right.
Because look, hear what sound. So if you say go, what's the first sound you hear in go? Go. What's the next sound? Oh. So this leads to show kids. So what you're leading kids to do is to be able to spell.
Right. But I
And to
guess
write.
then later when we went to then sound out a word, then the kids were saying oh for the sound for oh when it should be ah.
Yeah.
I guess
It
well I
confuses
have to
them.
look, but okay.
I know.
Okay,
So it was
but
just
Elkonin boxes, the purpose is, there was some researcher in Sweden, I think is where it's from, that came up with the idea. But what it is, it's just being very structured, okay, and that you use Elkonin boxes. All right, how about, when I say explicit phonics lesson, does your head pop with any knowledge about that? In here, they were really big, anytime you're working with struggling readers, that when we call it an explicit phonics lesson, that you have phonemic awareness, and then you introduce the sound spelling, and then you build the automatic word recognition, so whatever your sight words would be, and then you apply it to decodable text, and then you do your word work for your encoding. So do you guys use, I'm thinking with ReadyGen you have decodable text. Do you? Yes. And so sort of think about how is that laid out. So let's just sort of quickly sort of do a mock explicit phonics lesson. So let's say that I'm practicing the, what's the first sound you hear in ship? Okay, what's the ending sound you hear in ship? Oh, good. Okay, what's the first sound you hear in boat? What's the middle sound you hear in O? What's the ending sound? Okay, so then, I'm practicing phonemic awareness, and now I'm going to come over here. What's my thing to introduce my what? Sound spelling. So I used the word what? And I had and I had p, and then I had ba, and then I had o, and I had ta. And then I'm gonna tend like in your story you have this word, let's see, was, let me see what's another good sight word. Okay. So I would practice with the kids because these are words that are in this story, right? Explicit phonics lesson. Give me the sound. Shh. Give me the sound. Give me the sound. Okay. Really what I should have, excuse me, I should have had this written out this way. Let's go like this. Then I'm going to do ship and oh, and then I'm going to do the and was and look. Okay, so I'm practicing. So I'm introducing my sound spell. Sh, it. Okay, and then I'm doing here. And so what word does that make? Ship. And what do we have here? Ba, o. And then what word do we have? Boat. But I'm teaching the kids those individual sounds and then how those sounds then blend together to make words. And then I'm going to teach them what are the high frequency words in that story before we move on to that decodable text. Does that make sense? So that, I don't know if that will work with your Ready Jen, but we were really big on making sure all of our teachers with their decodable text that they sort of followed having an explicit phonics lesson, that you knew that you were teaching those sounds, you were blending those sounds together, you were looking at those high frequency words, and then you were going to that decodable text. Okay, blending routines. How many of you know blending routines? You're like, what are blending routines? Do you guys have any blending routines? Is any of your reading instruction discussed blending routines? No. Okay. So blending routines. So the two that I think you get the bang for you guys' buck, sound by sound. So just as I did that, you go shh, ship. Okay? So this is that explicit teaching. And then you've got, let's do ba, o, t, boat. And so just doing blending routines with kids. Brandy has my blending video if you really want to get into it, to watch the blending videos. Then the syllable types. How many of you guys know there are 6 syllable types? Would you write those down in your notes? You need to know the 6 syllable types. In Ready Jen, I know it introduces syllables. So the syllable types. Okay, we're going to watch the syllable types. Once I learned syllable types, when I look at words now, it is so hard to look at words and not look at them as far as syllables. So write down what the syllable types are. Did anybody know syllable types at all? It's really interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Kids, you can have a lot of fun with syllables and decoding and putting words together and being a multisyllabic word reader once you sort of embrace and know your syllables, okay? And then I'm going to do the syllabication rules. Does anybody remember any syllabication rules as a kid? Okay, how many of you know, how many vowel sounds are in a syllable? One vowel sound in a syllable, right? Okay, and so multisyllabic words, so if I have a word that has 2 syllables, how many vowel sounds do I have? 2?
Identify the vowels and split it in the middle.
Right, okay, alright, so we are going to watch
That's another good YouTube video.
this video about the syllabication rules. Alright. And then I will show you, at our ending task, I printed out the Ready Jen scope and sequence, and we can look to see where that stuff is put in there. My LOI instructors, you're gonna see syllable types introduced when you're working in probably the blue kids and stuff like that, but my heart.
Today I want to talk to you a little bit about syllabication. Oftentimes when we come across new text, we'll see a word that we're not familiar with, like this word. I don't know what this word says. And that's where syllabication can come in pretty handy. Syllabication is the division of words into its parts or syllables. Well, why would I want to do that? When I break up words into its syllables, it's a lot easier to read. In order to help us understand syllabication, we need to know some basic rules. First, every syllable has a vowel. And the number of vowels equals the number of syllables. So if a word has 2 vowels, it has 2 syllables. And if it has 3 vowels, it has 3 syllables. And when 2 or more consonants are between the vowels, you divide the syllable between the first 2 consonants. Are you ready to do some with me? Let's take a look at the first word. I'm going to first locate my vowels, U and E. So 2 vowels means there's going to be 2 syllables. But I also notice there are 2 consonants between my 2 vowels. So that means that I'm going to draw my line of syllabication between the 2 T's. Mutter, mutter. In my next word, I have the O, E, and I. So 3 vowels means there's going to be 3 syllables. In between 2 of my vowels are 2 consonants. So I'm going to draw my line of syllabication between the N and the D. But I also notice that ER is an architectural spelling, and that means that it needs to stay together. So I'm going to draw my line of syllabication after the R. Wonder-ing. Wondering. And finally, my last word has 2 vowels, so that means it's going to have 2 syllables. I notice that there are 3 consonants between my vowels, and the rule is to draw the line of syllabication between the first 2 consonants. Grumble. Grumble.
Kids
Now
love
it's your turn to
this
try
kind
some
of practice.
syllabication on your own.
Turn to your neighbor and tell them what you know about syllabication.
There's a lot of rules.
Syllable junction. What that means is it's when you have a 2-syllable word, it's where the syllables end.
How many of you?
You should just by sound, I say.
Well, you should be able to cite it, that's why I talked to the three words and having to follow specific rules.
Was that sort of fun to see? I mean, kids love as a, I wasn't gonna do this activity, but I just want to show you. I always have index cards when I'm doing guided reading next to me with my kiddos. And so when we come to a multisyllabic word, that we break it down and onto index cards. And then what kids love to do more than anything is that you put the index cards in front of them, and then they have to put that word back together again. I mean, there is so much excitement that you can have out of just simple index cards and doing syllables. And then what is a open syllable? Do you guys know an open syllable? When we said that term, what's an open syllable? Okay, an open syllable is where you have the long vowel sound. So let's talk music. Okay, what do we have? An open syllable here because you have a long vowel sound. And then this is a closed syllable because you have a short vowel. Does that make sense to you? Open, closed? Have you ever heard that terminology before? Okay, fabulous. I can't tell. And I'm so sorry you guys have that you're here, but this is what they want me to be doing, and I'm like going, okay, so what's an R controlled syllable?
A-R-E-R-I-R-U-R.
Did you guys know that? Okay, what's a consonant LE syllable? There was an example in the video. What's it? Well, no, what's the syllable? Bull, coal, those, okay? It's that consonant LE. So grumble, it was grum, bull. So this is a consonant LE, okay? And then we know that syllables have what? Two vowel teams that walk together are your diphthongs. Okay, so all I can say, the 6 syllable types for my first and second can really be a lot of fun. Kindergarten people, I don't know if they're introducing just go and cat, your nonsense words. Why do nonsense words lead into helping kids then go into those multisyllabic words? Because what do we know? Every syllable has what? One vowel sound. So those kids have to know their vowel sounds. Okay. This next strategy, I'm sort of thinking my intermediate people, I'll go over that more closely with them, but you guys, prefixes and suffixes, and then you underline the vowels, and you're teaching kids how to decode. So second grade teachers, you can be doing this kind of work, especially with your science and your social studies. Holy cow, should you be teaching kids how to do this? Yes, and it's easy, and what you do is you train their little brains that they want to be decoders. How many kids when you were little, you like to be a spy and you'd make up a code, for the alphabet, and you'd write a secret message by making the A be 2 dots and this and that? Do you remember doing things like that as a kid? Did you do that as a kid, making secret codes and this and that? No, oh my gosh, well you missed out. So, but just know that when you teach kids, that they have to think that they're being a decoder. They're like being the crime solver. They're being the detective. They're being Sherlock Holmes. They have to decode this stuff, and they've got these easy strategies because they know that every syllable has what? One vowel sound, that prefixes and suffixes, and going after and looking at those vowels. Okay, sound spelling cards. Those are the most important tools that you have in early literacy. We grouped ours by, these were all the short vowels, the long vowels. How many different ways are there to spell the long sound A? Right now, on your paper, write down all the different ways you know how to spell A. Make the sound A. Think about that. Okay? Think of all the different spellings. Because we have like over, I didn't read, there's 265 or 360, something like that, spellings for our 44 sounds. Who came up with that idea? And then we have words that are irregular. Okay? But how many different ways are there to make A? How many of you got AI? 2 vowels walk together. How many got AY?
Yep.
How many of you got an A with the consonant magic E? And how many of you got EIGH? And then, they. How do we make the long sound in they? Holy smokes, okay? So I heard through the grapevine, and when I looked at your Ready Gin, they came with sound spelling cards, correct? I would encourage you to have those up and displayed, okay? Here are our R vowels, our vowel teams, our consonants. Look at all this. So this is sort of second grade. Our kindergarten and first grade sound spelling cards were not as complicated, but once you got to second grade, third grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade, our sound spelling cards had more of the spellings on them. How many of you use sound spelling cards in your classroom on a daily basis?
Well, ours just have the picture for each one, but we don't use the Ready Gen ones because we use ones that have pictures that go with English and Spanish.
Okay, all right,
Those-
but you guys, they're a daily practice that you're using them. First grade team, are you using them daily, sound spelling cards? So that might be something as we do some reflecting, that you add that, this is a very important component, okay? And really what happens is it becomes that anchor chart for kids to look up at, that they're like, oh, yeah, to see that this is how I write this sound. Cause you've got the picture, I mean, we went through, you know, name the picture, name the sound, what's the spelling, you know, kind of a thing, you know, that you have your little routines about why you're doing it, and you do it over and over. Any questions about those? But I wouldn't, you get a lot of mileage, and for mine like Paras, they have a small set of sound spelling cards with them, but what you guys have with LLI is that that chart that has the pictures that go with it, are you guys, so that's what is your sound spelling, is for kids to be able to look at that and look at the sound and look at the spelling, okay? Because you've got that picture with the, I think it's the ape, and you've got fish and dog and cat. But would you write yourself a note to ask the reading lab team to make sure that you guys have a chart with the sound spellings, because you need it for your teaching. It's important. Okay, so now what I want you to do is I want you to go back and I want you to write down where I wrote underneath why it matters. I had that connection component to Ready Gen, and if you don't do Ready Gen, then I want you to sort of think about LLI, and I want you to reflect about phonemic awareness and phonics to see how you are going to make the connection or how you're going to use it with your teaching now that you have learned about what it is, what it means, and why it matters. But I want you, because you, and this is where I need you to really be thoughtful. Okay, so if you would please respond to that, I'll give you a few moments. Think about the implications for your teaching. Is it? What? Oh, right, no comprehension, nothing. Right, and so that's what we're gonna talk about, the comprehension. So what they've done, so what's been thankful for them, at least they got the decoding down. Oh, yeah, we're gonna talk about that, but, so. Those are so important, so critical, and I never knew till, had the purple boyfriend, and I can't even imagine not teaching without them.
I have the LLI posters in multiple places in my room.
Okay.
I have those.
They're really.
I think they're a little more clear about the different relationships.
Yeah, and then even like grouping them, these are the vowels, these are the consonants, because you just think you're teaching kids how to correct tones. Yeah, the blends, in your group. So you poor thing, is this working for you? You're thinking, why am I here? You get, and so you're making the application then about that phonemic awareness, and with LLI, when you read it, just, because you want to build that auditory skills for kids and struggling readers, so you're working, these kids are struggling. Alright, so can they hear those? And that hearing that then lends to that spelling, you know, so you're giving them a gift by practicing a ton of phonemic awareness and really being conscious about your phonics. So you guys are probably experts so far in the phonemic awareness and the phonics, because that's all you do. But yet, then we have to tie it to, we'll come back and tie it to the reading, so it's just sort of, you know, but thank you for what you're doing, okay? All right, and how's LOI going for you?
I mean, I don't like not seeing everything.
You don't like, okay. And you don't have any time that it's your core instruction?
I get half hour afterwards, but.
A half hour, so.
We do blending and segmenting and.
Do you do any,
alphabet.
we'll talk a little bit more about this reading
So I
stuff.
don't have time to pull kids unless it's in those play centers, which is a little chaotic.
A little chaotic.
And that's.
It's never perfect, that's for sure. If it was, you know, yeah, it's never perfect.
Well, like one of the parents was just like, oh, Jose, I think it's falling behind, or should we move him? And I'm like.
Is that, are you guys able to then make connections back to what you're teaching? Is this being helpful? Is it making it sort of being, my goal is that you're being like reflective, you know, that schema, I'm like, oh man, I know kids have to have phonemic awareness. They've gotta be able to phonics, and so in that science, when they're grappling with the text that's probably here, and they are here, so how am I going to take those and really meld it? Cause really, we should be thinking of teaching. Yes. I have been doing some reading since you guys are there. And I actually did a video about what they think you should be teaching them early, you know, because their brains are ready for it. So it should not be a hindrance. But yet we know in Spanish that there are certain words they call them that are almost exactly the same, the consonants, you know, and stuff like that, so that you're always bringing it. But I was worried, but everything I've so far read is like their brains are being wired just the same. So yeah, but
My thought is like, when I'm writing.
yeah, what a gift.
One is the translation, the second is
Right.
and I think when I'm super, you know, like what I'm trying to make meanings as a reading.
When you and I first you talk to your kids about that, and what a gift is that these kids, and to make them all celebrate their brains are truly on fire. You know what I mean? Because that it's those proteins, it's those enzymes, and the fact that their brain is getting more of a workout than our brain. Yeah.
She told me she
All the-
she's out of the
Is it?
said that she was coming from 8:45 or 9:00.
The first grade teacher was so
Our brains are getting a workout. So to be seated, but yet truly, what a gift, you know, so I haven't, you know, I keep going, oh my gosh, how's this gonna work, you know, but you be on it, you let me know, but there was a YouTube that I watched about the bilingual brain and just the left and the right hemisphere and that it sort of crisscrosses, but it was all, what a gift and how positive for those kids. But I always felt, because a lot of our kids are Tagalog, so that processing that, you know, when they have to do a written exam, you know, that's, you know, it's gonna be that writing to me and that comprehension. But yeah. Yeah. Yes, you're gonna bridge that gap for them.
Because I think the wrong lead to maybe a few level.
Yeah. Yes, I would say absolutely.
Because right now we do the same thing for everyone.
Practice more skills. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm gonna let you take your break now, and I'm gonna give you 10 minutes. So can everybody be back at 10 minutes to 10? Take 10 minutes, get up, move around, walk, if you have any questions, but move, think about your students. Yeah, read.
Which one?
Yeah.
But she has a thing where she's that one right there.
Okay.
When our kids came, singing to me, sister.
For the,
She took off the
the Colgate testing,
Yeah.
adding the stuff up from in there is so work. And when I came, my kids came to the Colgate testing, they wanted to go to the bathroom.
The numbers across.
It's
cold in here.
Oh,
go to the bathroom.
So they're
Cozy.
doing,
So,
they're making it.
you know, you have all these, but you know, to me that segmentation and that blending are your most powerful phonemic awareness elements.
Writing, I feel like we don't, everybody has their writing, and it wasn't even started,
But
it
there's
was
an
covering,
example
I was
every
like,
day.
what
She
the
has
fuck?
a
I
number.
do this.
Right, okay, yes.
Take things off, so they should chart, because I also.
So here's how I do it. You have this toolbox, no programs perfect, but you know when you're working with the kid, oh, this kid needs a lot more of this, I'm going to do it.
And my daughter, they are, I'm like, it's amazing.
Oh, the kid
Still.
okay.
That's not, it's not like, cause I only tested it.
Right, and, but they should with the phonics part, and then as they get, you know, I'm gonna say more comfortable with that, and you're the, thank goodness as a mom, but that you're paying attention to that and pointing those out, so that's why I always, I've told them over and over again about that popping of the sounds, and then the kids are writing always the next day after they read that instructional text, that, you know, they keep writing on the vowel sounds, you know, I mean, that you're saying that over and over. So I would probably,
What needs to go watch.
it's their understanding
It's
of reading
amazing.
instruction, and so you just make sure she knows her vowel sounds, and remember, LI is always extra, so that's the core instruction that is. And then I know that the early books, it's repeating, but yet it's trying to build that automaticity, but yet, you know, understanding the reading structure, that you're after that, those letters and those sounds, that you're constantly after letters and sounds of words. Does that help?
You know, those literacy things are super important.
So what kid is she working out of?
She's done with.
But it's hard to.
She tested, so it worked, so she probably just, what grade was she?
Second grade, she's second grade.
So maybe she just needed that extra time to be reading, you know what I mean, it's just because really, so my question in here is for us all to be reflective. How much time do our kids really spend when you're teaching? I mean, and I really need you to be, because what do we, and what I did, I mean, you were constantly doing digital, I mean, it wasn't like actually reading and listening to the kids in my classroom read. And that's why I love LOI so much, and when I knew that a kid was getting phenomenal core instruction, and then LOI on top of it, we would always boot out a ton of first graders and second graders, you know, right, you know, because they just needed that extra, but it's that core instruction. That's where the mainness of your reading instruction is happening with you guys. You're the front line. LO, that's, that, and it's the law states, it's that extra, it's not to take place of the front line instruction. Is that?
And it may not even be that she tested out, but there was probably more kids that needed the.
Yeah, we can look to see, do you know what instructional level she was, there may be more needier kids, or maybe she did test out, you know, so not knowing her, but we sort of like look at it, you know, when we wanna get rid of kids, it's because they're reading at their, where they should be, at that level, at time of year. And, then you always wanna be serving your most neediest, and now I know they're really trying hard, so you're bringing in, and I'm not gonna say, but here we have the music teacher teaching the most struggling readers. Now, so phonemic awareness and phonics is new to her, right? Am I gonna say? Completely, but yet I'm going to say, I'm hoping that you're building some connections about what you do as a music teacher. That's what you're up there, teaching those kids that music skill, those lines, and those notes make an ah, nah, whatever, and there's a rhythm to it. Yeah, so reading's the same thing, and we were not wired to read. We were wired to do this. Kids have this incredible bank of vocabulary or, words, speaking, but yet then we're trying to master that when they look at this spelling, that they're able to convert that to a word. Not easy. And then if we don't have sound spelling cards up, we gotta have that at the forefront of our teaching, is that we're teaching kids how to decode. We tend to make our rooms way too much stuff. Way too much stuff. And I don't know why we do that as teachers, but we do.
I think her reading rate is still, like, her orth is still
And we
low,
should,
right, Leanne?
what?
I think her orth is still low, her oral reading rate is
Her,
still
or,
low.
right now, so then what that tells me, some kids are naturally gonna be slow, but yet so when she's working really hard to decode, okay, so she hasn't built that automaticity of those words, and when she looks, that I see those words and I'm able to go, the boat ran, the dog ran, the cat ran, that when her eyes look at that, she's still spending time decoding. And is she trying to do a lot of sounding out?
That's what I noticed, she doesn't have.
She's not sounding
She was
out.
coming home with those LLI books, she wasn't sounding out. But that was not one of her strategies that she was using. when she
So,
got
so
stuck in
maybe
the
that,
word.
that, to look at those letters and sound out.
Ian does those under anymore, he memorizes the book.
Mhm.
So
That's
the
what I
little
saw
ones,
with
yeah,
Leanne.
so, and that's part of that routine, but
Not
yeah.
that we've actually recognizing the words, or we just have the book memorized?
Well, Leanne, and I realized that because on Wednesdays. we
These
tried
on
to-
level A and level B are pretty pattern driven.
Yeah.
But it's the instruction about teaching those patterns and looking at those words. So let's look, sight words, so like look, that beginning, that ending sound.
Yeah, that's true, he does look at the picture, like,
And,
for down, like when going down the stairs,
yeah.
down.
Is it look a sight word? Look is a sight word. You have some, well, they even argue now about sight words. So sight words now encompasses all words, irregular, and, phonics rules. So like look, was, they, those are
I think it's your
not how you
store.
would spell them, if I asked you to spell the
Word
word.
something.
I asked you to spell the word what. So if I asked you to spell the word climb, does that follow any phonetic
Online.
rule? Climb doesn't, does it? It doesn't, what makes that I say it's negative?
Superhero stuff.
Nothing,
And
okay?
like she's
So you got,
making,
I,
doesn't have y'all talking about it.
so you don't have any magic E,
Amazon.
so it's,
No,
I mean,
I think it was Amazon.
so just think about these poor little babies, and think about yourself.
Yeah,
What's
that's
your
fine.
memory of learning how to read?
Cause nobody knows unless you,
Well, it's in your hood.
How do you, I mean, think about it.
that's true, but you could hide.
And then think about what kind of a reader you are now. And when you look at a piece of text, and how do you understand it? And what's your strategy when you come up to a word that you don't know?
Yeah.
So the same things that you do, oh wait, there is what,
She broke them down, I have like, they made the schwas and all that writing.
Oh, I didn't have any of that.
Oh, yeah.
I had a hodgepodge of teaching, but that was really cool.
No, I had a really, really good first grade teacher. I realized now she was a really good first grade teacher, I hated her. But she was really good.
you had the spot,
I think so, but.
Dr. Seuss?
No, I mean like the little first grade,
Okay.
spot the dog or
So
something.
if I can ask everybody to put up their, items, your technology, feel like a middle school teacher. And then I want you just to sort of reflect back before we get started in this next part about how you learned how to read. And when did you learned how to read, and then what type of a reader are you now? Just
I have
in your head,
no
think about it.
recollection. I just know I started early school, so my mom says you went to special reading class for a while, and then after that I was fine. But I don't remember. Do you guys remember? Is it just 'cause I'm old?
I think the nursery
school district.
I just
You were
remember
the-
always being told, sound it out, break it into parts.
Break, uh-huh.
But I was the same way, I was too shy to read aloud, and so then my mom told me they were gonna put me into sped, and then I went to school the next day and read the chapter book to my teacher, and she was like, oh, never mind, you don't
Yeah,
need to go into sped.
that's why I was told I had a hard time at the
But I was
beginning,
too shy
and
to
then
read
I
aloud.
never had a problem, like in first grade, and then I never had a problem ever since, I don't remember ever.
How many of you like to read as adults? Are you novel readers or an information reader? Both, okay, you like, okay, you read the sports news, okay, information, okay, and, so. Okay, so we'll come back to that, but I want you always to be thinking about you as a reader and how comfortable you feel as a reader. And what are your strategic processes to help you understand what you read? Because that's important as we continue our journey. All right, fluency. The ability to read accurately, quickly, and expressively. So right now you guys are all doing Dibbles. Dibbles is new this year with the Dibbles 8. So first grade, you started off, some of the kids did a Dorf, and when I say Dorf, you read a passage and you have the how many words per minute the kid needs to read. So do any of you know right off back what is for my first grade teachers, what is the benchmark for your first graders to be able to read at the end of the year? How many words per minute should first graders be reading at the end of the year? 60? Okay, how about second grade, what are you guys?
Was it 90?
Second grade at the end of the year is 94, right? I'm reading about 94 words, 127, between 94 and 127 for second grade. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, you guys have implemented, okay, and so Dibbles has their national norms, and you can look in this book and it will tell you the national average, and then I even had a thing about how many words you can learn a week, I should have brought that out, but I think it's like first grade, 2 words a week that you think that you can add to their vocabulary, and so that ups their Dorf and stuff like that. But fluency is the ability, as you're reading, to speak and to make sense of what you're reading. So we don't want kids to be word barkers, those that are, when you're in the classroom teaching kids, that they want to just read them as fast as they can, but yet there's no comprehension, all right? But to be able to read fluently, your brain has to be able to look at those words, and you have to be able to decode them, and then you have to be able to understand. So why this matters, so I need you to write it down, is fluency. When we listen to kids read fluently, or when we listen to kids read, we get a sense of what their decoding skills are. Are they tripping up on multisyllabic words? Are they tripping up on sight words? What's going on? So anytime you listen to a kid read, you want to be paying attention to how are they decoding. Because then that's the bridge to their understanding. Why it matters.
When you talk about the Dibbles, which I didn't know about.
Yes.
but how many words, if they're not understanding it, why is that important?
Okay, so why that's important, at least it tells you that they can decode. So remember, what were the simple view of reading? They have to be able to decode, and then what's the next part of reading? They have to understand. So fluency lets us know how well they're decoding, right? So, and how they recognize, and it shows us their automaticity, how hard their brain has to work to read that passage. So when you're working in LLI, what's the first routine that you do? Is that you do what for the first 5 minutes? you reread. What skill can you be working on if you're rereading? Well, what else can you be working on? Their fluency. Okay? So you're working their fluency. How many of you find the round robin question that I asked? How many of you do round robin reading, and is it beneficial? Oh, good. I see. There we go. So round robin reading was if I asked him to read a page, and then she reads the next paragraph, and then you read a 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 paragraph. I was just at a dyslexia training, and the memories of learning how to read came flashing back. The teacher tricked us, but here's how she tricked us. She gave us a packet, and it was a group of like 60 adults, and she said, okay, you start here, I want you to read here, but yet, and the words were not spelled correctly. It was sort of like that we were going to have to sort of decode it and try to figure it out. And what she did is some of the other people in the room, she gave them the correct, that it was all. So this darling started off and was sort of, trying to decode it by sounding it out and stuff, and sort of struggled, and then that person, and then this person read and it was like perfect. Well, the rest of us, you could just sort of see how we all immediately went back to that first grader. Oh, don't call me. I don't want to read out loud because I know I'm not going to be able to do this. I can't do this. I can't read. She made us go for about 15 minutes, and you should have seen the stress. And once she came clean, and I was so stressed out that I didn't even catch on where, the smarty pants sitting next to me, Glenda Jackson, was like, after it went on for a few, she realized that the teacher had tricked us, and some of the people had the passage and they were able to read it, and the rest of us all went right back into that, don't call me, I'm not going to read this, when that other person read it so beautifully, and I'm looking like, I can't quite figure out for sure what that is. Okay, I'm going to decode it, those are the sounds, but that doesn't sound right. Very stressful, very stressful. As a kid, round robin reading was very popular. I still to this day can walk in classrooms and see round robin reading. Round robin reading is a no-no. It accomplishes really nothing. And to have 26 kids, 24 kids sitting in a room and one kid's reading a paragraph, because if you're a kid that's going to be, sweating bullets, what are you going to be doing? You're going to be practicing your little paragraph when it comes to your turn to read, because do you want to be embarrassed? No. Okay? So that is what round robin reading is. And even when you're working in LLI with kids, you don't do round robin reading. The only time I have kids read out loud sort of separately is if I ask them, show me your favorite part. What was your favorite part? So that they'll read that. And so what I know when they tell me they read their favorite part, I know what they've made a connection to. And then that lets me know where they're understanding and stuff like that. But you don't do round robin reading. No. Throw it away. You don't do it. There's no benefits. Now, we're going to, in a minute, talk about all the other kinds of reading that are beneficial. But when and there's these national norms that national norms. We know that we want kids, at least for us, by the time they left elementary school, we wanted at least 100 words per minute. And our goal with 100 words per minute, because when you go to middle school and you go on, that you're going to be lagging behind if you cannot get up to that 100 words per minute. Now, Dibbles has, 8th is new, so they sort of have adjusted their benchmarks. But I would encourage you to sort of know at your grade level, what are your benchmarks, and then for you to be thinking, okay, fluency, how am I going to be practicing this in my classroom? I know that decoding, I'm doing that through my phonics work, my phonemic awareness, but yet then I'm going to be practicing my fluency, because there are those words, the they, the was, your sight words and this and that. What am I doing in my routines to help my kids become fluent readers? Okay, who knows what choral reading is when I say choral reading? Okay, that's everybody reads together. So LLI people, you should be doing a ton of choral reading that you're all reading together. The kids are having to what? Stay up with you. You choral read it. You make them follow, but you choral read it. Whisper reading is LLI, and when you're doing your guided group. And then you have kids whisper reading and you walk around and listen to the kids read, okay? Whisper reading. Echo reading is where I read a line and then what do? You repeat it. Partner reading is, you know, in your classroom pairing kids up, teaching kids how to pair up and they partner read. Does everybody understand when you pair kids up, you sort of go high, low, and then you bridge it like this, that you do that? Does that make sense what I just did? So you have your highest to sort of your lowest, and then you match a partner by going this way. You never take that highest and try to have him always be with the lowest. You go this way. Does that make sense, what I just did? Okay, really important with partner reading if you're in your classroom and you're doing those types of things. Kids love this one. LLI's filled with Reader's Theater. Can you be doing Reader's Theater? You know, that was one of the tricks we always, you know, kids love plays, you know. And I look at what you do as a reading teacher. You're doing choral reading, aren't you? I mean, aren't you having the words up there? And you might even sort of think, as a music teacher, what can I be doing constantly? That I'm teaching reading all day long because those kids are learning the words of those songs and they're having to follow along with me, and those words are up there. And then you might, the words and the songs that you know are going to be problematic, that you sort of break some phonemic awareness and you do some decoding skills to let them know, okay? Music and reading, great friends. All right, repeated readings. Who knows what repeated, I use the word, but what are repeated readings in your classroom? You read it more than once. How many of you have ever done that activity where you give a kid a cold read on a Monday, you sort of, and then the kid reads it every day, and then Friday they take it again and they sort of see how they increase. Kids love that kind of work, and they like to graph their progress. So that is a very powerful tool to use, repeated readings, and you know, kids, you know, sitting at home practicing, but kids like seeing. Everybody wants to feel successful. Every kid wants to feel that they are growing as a reader. Any questions on fluency? Turn to your neighbors and tell them how you practice fluency in your classroom. And then after you finish talking, I want you to write down that. And write down.
I do, I've been using a Sarah list for the leaders. We do the choral reading, whisper reading. We did the, yeah. I'm sorry, it's just those readers, I love them. There's 3 lessons.
I want you to jot down under the fluency right now, jot down how you make connections with fluency. What do you do in your classroom with your Ready Jan or what? That you're practicing fluency. Because it's an important part. What?
Look at so the echoes they
use that time.
do not encourage it with the child.
How come?
Because there's like a split second that they're waiting to hear what we do. And so it definitely you teach it the echo.
The echo.
And then let them sing with the rhythm of the music, but you don't as a teacher, because they're always on that just a split second.
And so you have the words up there? You sing it and then you have the words. And are you pointing to the words?
I have like the song on one slide, I'll have the words, and so to learn it, yeah, it's up there.
But
And
so,
then
look at
follow
you.
the bouncing Mickey.
Yeah, you're teaching reading and you're teaching rate and you're teaching prosody because you don't want to sing that song way too fast. No, I mean you have a rhythm. And that's exactly what oral reading is, that you have a rhythm, that you teach kids the rhythm. So you need to start saying, I'm the music reading teacher in this building, okay? And that the kids go to music because they are reading. They're reading, all right? Okay, did everybody jot down? And in PE, we're gonna talk about how you're gonna be doing it in PE. I've got some ideas already rolling around in my head, okay? All right, and I want you to be thinking about it more too. When we end, what could you be doing in PE that encourages reading? All right, okay. All right, vocabulary. What is vocabulary and why is vocabulary important? Okay. Vocabulary, most kids have a ton of vocabulary in their words, but we know that children that are deprived, that are coming from homes when their parents are not what with them? Talking to them, reading to them. How does your vocabulary grow? Exposure. So you're ready, Jen. I think that's one of the highlights to that program. Is really you got a lot of vocabulary, am I right? I mean, and you guys do a lot of work with the vocabulary, because I went online, I YouTubed, I watched lessons, I downloaded, I tried to really get a sense of what you're using, and vocabulary stuck out to me, that there is a ton of vocabulary. And one of the lessons I watched a small group, it was all about the vocabulary and how it was a second grade teacher with Stella Luna. So climbered and clash and trembled, you know, all those words. So I just was like, vocabulary, because Ready Gen's that next generation of reading, and so they're trying to build on kids' vocabulary, because vocabulary is important to what part of reading? What is vocabulary important to? The comprehension. If you don't, you can't understand what you're reading if you don't have what? Vocabulary. So it's tied closely to comprehension. So, and then it's mostly learned through everyday listening, read alouds, and reading. And so your Ready Gen seems like that is their one of their major goals. Okay, why it matters. Okay, so write down why comprehension matters. And it must be, here's what that word again. What is the word that I asked you to pay attention to? What do we keep hearing? Explicitly. Are you guys teaching your Ready Gen vocabulary explicitly with those stories? Okay. And then we're going to talk about that word. Okay, write that down. Tell me, what are some vocabulary strategies when you say that? What are your vocabulary strategies?
Look at pictures.
You in first grade to have the kids look at the picture to try to get a meaning of what a word is. Second grade, how about you guys?
I use anchor charts for math.
You use anchor charts for vocabulary strategies? For math. So what you have, what? The vocabulary words?
I have words like regrouping the 10. I have words on my anchor chart that students are expected to do.
Okay, so you have academic vocabulary up, and you have kids paying attention to that academic vocabulary, okay? How about kindergarten? What about you guys with vocabulary?
Gestures.
A lot of, okay, and is that through Ready Gen following, do they give you strategies in there?
No, it's more of like a picture with a definition and then, yeah.
But they don't even give you the picture. Teachers say teachers.
I've had to make all
Or
my
like
stuff.
give examples, like say if the word was fluffy or something, you know, a rock, is a rock fluffy? No, it's not fluffy when you go through it.
Okay.
Yes, it's fluffy or whatever.
All right, how about you, Sadie? What are you thinking when you think vocabulary? How do you enhance your classroom with vocabulary instruction? All right,
Yeah, that's hard, cause really only has 20 minutes for that whole piece, the comprehension and the vocabulary, and because I'm doing an hour of reading groups, so.
Oh, you're doing small group instruction?
Right.
Okay, so your core instruction, okay, alright, but vocabulary, okay, music teacher, what do you do when you have vocabulary words? Do you have, sort of, when I think music, you, symbols and pictures and stuff like that? PE teacher, what do you do with vocabulary words? Demonstrations, you have a word chart, you have things anchored up at all? No, but you just, when you need to teach vocabulary in PE, so what would be a vocabulary word? I'm thinking about, like, what are you studying right now?
Sports or like, well, so if we do, I also do a little bit of health, so like if we do nutrition, we do have pictures
Okay.
of like certain foods or like fat, grains, things like that.
So giving the kids that you have those words and the kids have to know the
So
definition.
where do you find carbohydrates or like grains?
But they have to know what a carbohydrate is.
So that would just be the definition.
Okay,
You don't have
alright.
a picture for it, so.
Okay, but do you see that as a PE teacher, your vocabulary, enriching the lives of students with vocabulary. And then those of us that are in the classroom, it's the stories that we're teaching and the materials that we're instructing, that we're enriching their lives with vocabulary. Now, here are vocabulary strategies that you want, kids to be able, it's a no-brainer, a dictionary, and morphemic analysis. What do I mean by that? This is sort of that you're teaching kids to understand the word parts, so prefixes and suffixes. Second grade, is it too early to give you have prefixes? Redo, unpack. Are there suffixes, shun and ly? But yet you're paying attention that you're teaching kids. Okay, and then to be able to infer meanings in words, so you think about, what in the story, how does it let me lead to know that, if you have a comma, a lot of times you'll have a vocabulary word, and then what do you have? You have a comma, and then it gives the definition to the word, so that you are showing the kids that these are the strategies to help you understand. And then we have your Spanish English. So because this is new for me, and so I was looking at sort of the definition. So I guess between Spanish and English, there's a lot of words that are pretty similar, because they broke it down into 4 categories. So you guys tell me, and that since, if I was a teacher here, I think I would always be exploring that Spanish-English connection and what's happening to my kids, and how can I be the best reading teacher for them when they're speaking, I'm hearing 2, possibly 3 languages, have all of that rolling around up in their little heads, and then, I'm looking for this instruction. So here's what I want you guys to tell me. So there are many words in Spanish that they're spelled the same. Do we have a lot of, and then we have some that are spelled nearly the same, and then we have some that are pronounced nearly the same, and then we have ones that are the complete opposite. So I wrote the definition of pan and pan. So we think of a pan in English as, over there's a pan, and in Spanish pan is bread. Okay, so, yes. So just making sure that, are you guys, because you teach here, are you well aware of all of those? Well, you guys, are you guys all well aware of those? I would want to know those, and I just, that you realize that students are going to, okay, fabulous. But that's, if I was here as a teacher, I would want to know that information. Okay, so now I want you to write down vocabulary, your connection to what you're teaching. How are you making vocabulary important in your instruction? So right now, in Ready Gen or LLI or even the subject area, what do you do that you bring vocabulary alive and well into your room? Because it really is. And when I think about your population, your kiddos, to build that understanding of those vocabulary words, so that when they have to read that text, they have an understanding. And so I'm thinking Ready Gen, does it have an EL component? I know that LLI does. If you look at the very back of your lesson plan, that they always say to make sure your students have an understanding of this. So does Ready Gen operate that way? Ready Gen teachers, does it have an EL component? It does, okay, and it tells you what you need to be building to make sure kids understand. Music teacher, on a day-to-day basis, do you do things to make sure that your children understand what they're singing, that those vocabulary words have meaning to them? Okay, because really, I mean, the population here, the kids are, most of them are bilingual, aren't they? And then we have babies that are just learning English for the first time. And then we've got, and what percent are learning English just as the first time? Would you say? Are most of your kids, I mean, would you say that 90% of our kids are bilingual here? Or are you gonna tell me that, no, 30% of them are learning English for the first time?
Well, according to the bilingual, it's about 90% of my class is learning English for the first time.
Is learning English for the first time. So then what does that then make a reflection for your teaching? What do you have to do? I mean, that's what, and we'll come back and talk about, but I want you always to be thinking, what does that mean for me, because I am their reading teacher? So what am I going to do every day in my classroom to ensure that these kids are getting the skills necessary, because by the end of second grade, they're going off to third grade, they need to be reading to learn. We're teaching them how to read. And what am I doing every day to ensure that? Based off of these 5 components. Okay, so are you writing down? Write down what you're going to do with that vocabulary in your classroom. We're going to come to my favorite subject. Okay, comprehension is really very interesting. So who can tell me what is comprehension? That is the what? What is comprehension? When we say that word, because I can have so many people come to me, oh my God, they don't understand what they're reading, right? So what is comprehension? The ability to understand and remember. Are some of us better at it than others? Do you all have your tricks to help you understand and to remember what you're reading? Turn to your neighbor and tell them right now, what are your tricks to help you when you're, to understand? What are your tricks? Reread. Reread. Okay, I'm hearing rereading, what? Highlighting, how to remember. What do you have to do? Take notes. What do you do? What's this table? Does everybody
take notes?
Reread, take notes, highlights? How many of you highlight way too much stuff? The whole page is highlighted. You know, that you have to really try to learn that you highlight just the most, what? Important details. But I'm really bad, man. I get a happy highlighter when I start doing stuff. Okay? How many of you, if I say the word grapple with the text, what am I meaning? That you grapple with the text. You are exactly correct. That you have to grapple with that text because you have to gain meaning. Okay, how many of you know, okay, so students have to be able to, how many of you know what it means to predict? How many of you, when you're reading to kindergartners, that you ask them to predict? And do you use that academic vocabulary? Do you? Oh, yes, you do that. Predict. Are we using that academic vocabulary? Not, you should be. Predict. What's it mean to infer?
Make connections between related information.
So smart. Yes. What is it?
Making connections between related information.
So look at my face right now and please infer how I'm feeling right now. Okay. Do children infer all day long about how you're feeling?
Yeah.
Can you give the magic teacher eyes that they infer immediately what they better do? Do you do it with your significant others? Can you look at somebody and go, so I have been inferring all day long what you folks are thinking. By your what? By your body language. So what am I doing? My brain is making connections to your body language, and I'm inferring what you're feeling and thinking. Okay? When you're reading and you're thinking, you are always inferring. We want you inferring when you're reading because you're making connections. You're reading in between the lines. Now, sometimes we know that word assumption can sometimes get us in trouble, that we make assumptions, but yet that is a skill when kids are reading. How are they, and now we're going to get into how they learn all this great vocabulary. Making connections. Why is making connections so important with reading?
To make it relevant to the kids.
To make it, okay, it makes it, what else does it do?
Makes them remember it.
We can make them remember it. How about to help them? You got it. It makes it understandable. If you can't make a connection, if you were to ask me to read the refrigerator book, How to Fix the Refrigerator right now, because I'm getting that little sign that I need to change the filter. Who could do it much faster than me? My husband. We have a well, and we have had a lot of rain over last week on Whidbey Island. So at 11 o'clock, I wake up to the septic alarms going off, I'm like, my husband was in China. So I come downstairs at 11 o'clock at night, and I'm underneath the house trying to look, and I've got all these alarms, and I'm trying to remember, how am I supposed to fix this? Well, I didn't do it correctly because I turned off the whole system because I was just like, there was something about the levers or something, And so finally I got these 3, levers off, and so the alarm went off. So I was just so glad about that because I didn't want to be disturbing my neighbors. He's a tax accountant at 11 o'clock at night, and I'm, getting the whole neighborhood, awake. So when my darling husband came home, he made me I have a lovely binder that's out there, and he took pictures of everything and drew arrows, and he walked it through to me. So hopefully I will be much better about reading his instructions, and because he's gone half the month always in our life, that I'm going to be able to solve that issue. But my brain doesn't operate that way. My husband's a mechanical engineer. He flies for FedEx. He's all over the world. I like to clean. I just say I'm the Windex person in the family. I can keep a clean house. I know how to organize. Cooking's really not my gig, but if your house needs to be clean, I can come over and clean your house and get it organized and have your closet organized. Okay, that's how my brain works. But making connections. So I'm much better about making a connection with your closet and getting it organized than I am about taking care of your septic tanks. Okay. So when you're teaching kids how to understand things, what do you need to be doing? You got to build their connection. My darling husband's building my connection to the septic tank by having a nice diagram for me so I can solve this problem. Okay, and you have to analyze. You have to be able to think, and you want to teach children. Now, why does this all matter? Why is comprehension so important? Why does this matter? What's the point of, why do you want children to learn how to read? Why do you want kindergartners to learn how to read? Why do we want kids to learn how to read? So what were those literacy facts that we saw? What happens to kiddos if they don't get to learn how to read? What kind of opportunities do kids have if they don't know how to read? And this is when I get very serious. Okay, so here I am. This is a serious Lynn. What happens to kids? And if we don't do our jobs, because this is our job, to teach children how to read. And right now, we're not looking like we're doing a good job of it. And there's a lot of people out there that got a lot of opinions about it. But if we don't teach kids how to decode and then how to comprehend what they're reading, we've done them a huge injustice. I mean, that's how upset I get, and how upset when I'm out and I observe teachers and I observe lessons, and I was just a TOSA, that I would come back and I would just be, oh my God, that is not fair to that kid. That's how that makes me so sad. It's not fair to that kid. And believe me, do I know that you have darlings in your room that are rolling on the floor and biting and kicking? And you know, the hardest part of our job is what? What's the hardest part of your job? Management. Oh my goodness. So, but yet we think about that management, and then we think about, sometimes what could be causing those management issues is when kids aren't learning and know they can't do it. How many of you like to be sitting and doing things when you can't do it? What's your behavior like?
Well, we see it with our monolinguals at the beginning of the year when they came, right? We're speaking to them in English, we see it now. And they don't know what you're talking about, they don't know what you expect of them, so they're off doing other stuff, rolling around in the brush.
I mean, what, and wouldn't you? I mean, some of you, I mean, like Ryan, I'm sort of thinking, you had to come, I know it, and you're being very kind, but if you wanted to be a little turkey, you could be on the floor right now rolling around, because this isn't relevant to you. You could be on your phone right now, texting and, doing your shopping. You could be writing your lesson plans. You could be doing anything but listening to that lady from Whidbey Island and what she has to share. Okay? But I know your classroom management is critical to being able to get kids to have to be able to read. And I think there's sometimes a correlation as kids progress through school, how painful it must be that you cannot read, that you've missed that instruction, that someone has not been able to get to you to help you, that they didn't have the skills. Does that make sense? Am I speaking a language? Okay, so even before children become independent readers, they can be practicing and developing comprehension skills. So kindergarten, first grade teachers, tell me how that works in your classroom. How are we teaching kids to understand what they're reading even when they can't read? What are we doing?
Asking questions.
How are we doing it? You said it. And what happens in read alouds?
Ask questions.
They're listening, and so besides asking questions, that's one of the things.
Have them retell the story.
They're retell. So what do we call retell? You put things in order, a sequence. Okay, can we use those words? Sequencing, can we use good questions? What else do we ask kids to do? We can do in a read aloud. What? They can infer. Can we stop and read a line to them and ask them? I always use the word reading brain. I always, when I'm talking with kids and working with kids, what is your reading brain thinking? This is what my reading brain is thinking. Is your reading brain on fire? Or is your reading brain on fire? Is there working? Don't you want the kids in your PE to be athletic and to be moving and to jumping? You want their bodies to be on fire, right? Music teacher, don't you want your kids singing and loving music and to be on fire with music? Okay, teachers, you have them all day long. You gotta have their brains on fire about reading, math, and science, but you know for sure reading and math, right? The kids have to know how to read, and they gotta know their math facts, because they can't do anything else if they don't know their math facts and they can't read. All right, so reading. So when I say this word, skills, I want you to find, I asked you to write that question down. What's the difference between a strategy and a skill? Go back to see how you answered that. What's the difference between a strategy and a skill? Because we say comprehension skills, and then I use this big old word, metacognitive strategies. What's a skill versus a strategy? Very good. Okay.
Do you use the skills and strategy?
Well, we do both. So so this was my reading last night. I told you I'm pretty nerdy. I'm a very boring person. You know, I went to bed sort of reading about how we've gotten strategies and skills sort of muddied in our life. A skill is when we talk about in reading, so the main idea, you know, summarizing, you know, the cause and effect. Strategies are things that you do to help you get to the end, okay? Your strategy is that to help you do. Did everybody get that sort of filled out? Okay. All right, go take, I'll give you about 3 minutes, 4 minutes, stand up, go potty, move around, and then we're gonna come back and we're gonna do the wrap-up task, okay? Thank you. You guys are hanging in there with me. All right, you're not misbehaving, so thank you. All right, I have a pretty, I've got 28 years of being, you know, like, roll the eyes and make you behave. Stand by you. Okay, that teacher stare that says, knock it off. All right. So, well, so, you have a problem, and we're talking second grade. So, what are you doing in guided reading with them?
So we have like the reading app and stuff, but we, for the
What-
course, I read out loud and then I have the kids that, I'll have volunteers and then like most of the kids that can't kind of read in my class, and so they read aloud. I have another center paragraphs and things like that.
So it sounds like you're not doing round robin reading, are you?
No, not vocabulary, cause I don't have kids that don't want to read.
That still to me is a round robin reading. Don't do that, and remind me, so I hope you won't let me talk to the class about that. That to me still, if your whole class is doing that, you want to be choral reading. You want
Yeah, we
everybody.
do read group, like we do read stories together, I'm just talking
Okay.
about like volunteers to read.
Do they come back after you've done a choral read? What's the purpose of that?
Well, I just feel like it's more engaging for a kiddo to read than for me, than to hear my voice all the time.
So, and part of me would think it's probably better to hear your voice because you're the expert. I mean, I just,
Well, I'm not saying like I'm reading the whole
Okay.
passage.
okay,
It's like, I mostly read it.
and maybe, I would just be thinking about the kids in your classroom and what you wanna always be thinking, how much time are they having to spend in text and they're reading?
Yeah.
They're reading, so, but, yeah, it's, and we're gonna use the word I haven't used yet with you guys, is a dance. To me, everything is a dance. And I gotta know what I'm after and how am I going to get my end results.
Yeah.
And what are my tools, and time is of an essence. And where am I going to get the most out of my teaching instruction?
Yeah, but most of the kids don't know.
Most of them, so it
And my-
seems like that your shared reading, so you're second grade. So we'll have to, when we, I think, am I meeting with you guys tomorrow? I'm meeting with you next time.
Yes.
Okay, so to look at, but most of them, so we've got some work we need to do, because, that concerns me, that most of them at all don't know. Okay, and so what are they reading then? I mean, if they can't read, then what do they have in front of them? So they can't read a level A book, I mean, and they don't have any. So then it gets into, so what are they getting out of what you're doing? Does that, I mean, just like you're here,
Well, they can like ask it, like they can answer questions if I read something to them, but they don't know how to, like,
so
read
you're,
it.
you're working on their comprehension, but just like you're here, what are you getting out of it? I mean, just have to be very intentional and very thoughtful about what's happening in your classroom. I think it's easy for us to get into these routines that we have a checkoff list and we just do. Does that make, today I'm just gonna read aloud, but really I have no reason why or what, and my kids aren't reading anything that, that we have to be, and I think that we have some talking to do, I guess. I mean, until I see stuff sometimes, but it would make me really nervous that you feel like none of the kids can read it, so it's in guided reading. And what are we doing in guided reading? Do you have any books in there that they are with you reading?
Yeah, mostly during intervention time.
Okay. And then when you're teaching the phonics and the decoding, so it sounds like you have to be doing a ton of work teaching sound-letter relationships and teaching kids how to decode words, because you can't read if you can't decode the letters and put those sounds together. So that explicit phonics lesson, it seems like you would be doing that all the time, that you are teaching sounds, and then you teach these sounds, they go together to make a word, and then I have these high frequency words, and then I'm going to a piece of decodable text. Because how are they going to learn to read if they can't take those letters and those letters produce sounds? So you're gonna have to back up, it sounds like.
I think that's where I'm at too,
Yeah.
is trade books are so much above the level that they're at, that, I mean, the eye reading, that's fine, but the shared reading, you can't do that with those things.
So supposedly, okay, let's go back. Okay, I need phones up, this is when I get, and I need eyes here. Okay. So from my understanding, Ready Jen has a read aloud.
Yes.
Am I correct? And that read aloud is,
Well, it's
do you
not
do it all week?
excessive. It's
What?
actually intended to be a shared reading, but it's not comprehensible to the kids, so we have to do it as a read aloud.
So like the first day you read the whole book all the way through, and then the rest of the days throughout the lesson, you're only focusing on like two pages. And then the
That's
kids
when
are
you look at the
supposed to read that with you.
So it's more of a shared
Yeah,
read.
like when you came into my class.
That was, but yet your kids didn't have the books in front of them.
Yeah, they did. They had
Did they have the
little-
books? Okay, all right. So this is, so just so in your head when you're teaching, that a read aloud, kids don't have a book in front of them. That's you teaching kids, modeling, you're reading, oh my goodness, this word's giving me a hard time, I'm gonna do this. This is what I'm thinking because this is the text. So you don't, maybe you don't read the whole story, you just do a small component, but that's where you do your direct instruction in a reading lab. I don't know how Ready Jen's organized, but just this is what types of reading should look like in your classroom. Then when you do a shared reading, it says 1 grade or slightly above is the goal. Okay, and it's always you're concentrating on the same skill, strategy here, and the kids have that piece of text in front of them. When you guys do LOI, the kids all have that book in front of them, okay? You're doing a group reading. Then when you do your guided reading, don't you have other books at their level and how are those books? Are those books on target at all? Do they?
Those are better.
Are they better?
They're kind of boring, so I mean, they're not engaging.
That's what always makes me sad for kids, is that they're not, but I can't solve that. All I can tell you is your purpose with guided reading is that you've done a good job here modeling the comprehension skills that they want you to do with that book. And the kids are all reading, you're teaching kids how to be decoders. And then you go into this guided reading, and you have materials for that guided reading, and that's when you're doing that small group instruction. So, because I'm not there ready, I don't know, but just when you think about your classroom setup and you're teaching reading, that these are the strategies for modeling reading in your classroom, the types of reading that we hope are happening in your classroom. Because where else are you reading? Does that make sense? I mean, when we're talking about teaching kids how to read. And so the people are doing the LLI, you're in this zone, you're in that guided reading intervention. You're like the extra sprinkles. The core instruction, the stuff that happens in core, is the most critical reading. What you guys do. That intervention's that added layer. Am I making sense? And believe me, I know it's not easy, but what I'm hoping is that you become more intentional instead of I'm just doing this because it tells me to do this on page 29. You know, I'm just doing it. Instead, I know I have to do this. I have to know phonemic awareness. I have to do phonics. I have to do vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. And the ultimate goal is comprehension. How am I teaching my kids how to read? And ReadyGen is your it. It's your tool that you're supposed to be incorporating. So when I look at ReadyGen, I printed out their scope and sequence. Here's how they have you guys divided. K6, reading. The first heading is concepts, print and print awareness, phonological and phonemic awareness, phonics, decoding, and word recognition. Then it goes vocabulary, concept development, and then it has reading skills, and then it has reading comprehension, and then you get down into sort of doing analysis, literary analysis, response, and appreciation. But it lays it out very nicely about those 5 components. I mean, I'm looking at ReadyGen. When you look at the blurb, they say it's all the new generation for teaching
But it's
reading.
2.5 hours to get through all that.
Yeah.
So we don't have that.
You don't have 2.5 hours to get through.
We don't have time.
So what do you think is the most important part? What do you think? Because I'm hearing kids can't read, her kids, so first, second, here we go to second grade. These second grade people have a whole bunch of kids, and she's telling me they don't know, they can't read. They don't, right? Isn't that, how do you describe them? They don't.
I have 16 kids, and I have 7 kids that recognize maybe the word the, but they can't speak a sentence if I were to give them a sentence.
So that's 7 kids.
Phonemic awareness would be my guess. Because as first grade teacher, I had kids say always knew the letter names, no letter sounds coming in. But when you get into blending, segmenting, rhyming, onset, all that stuff, that's where they struggled. And I think maybe that comes partly from learning, from knowing 2 languages and all those sound manipulations. But that's where it struggles. That's where we're weakest. That's what we're not teaching very much of in LLI.
Not really. I disagree with that thought a little bit. Because I think you have to look at what?
We might do syllables for a minute. We might do rhyming for a minute or 2 minutes. Very, very small. It's not as intense. I think, especially for kindergartners, they need some phonemic awareness intervention.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So phonemic, but if you know phonemic awareness and you're using LLI, you can incorporate it. I mean, nothing is perfect, but
it's frustrating being told you have to follow this, you have to do what it is.
Teach it to fidelity, but
Teach
then
it to
you're
fidelity,
bringing in other
but
resources.
there's no way humanly
So we will
possible
help.
for it.
Well, to me, it doesn't take about 5 seconds with phonemic awareness with LLI.
Well, I could go and modify
when
it,
the
but
kids
that's
are
not teaching it to fidelity.
reading the story, it's a tool, it's a strategy, and that you're popping sounds. You read, you stop, and you pop sounds.
I mean, does anybody else feel like you're being told to follow this to fidelity, but you know that the things that your kids need most are not things that they're getting enough of?
Well, and the hardest part too is that when we do go into the reading lab, at least for kindergarten, we have maybe 15 minutes in there, just because we're given 20 minutes, but to get the kids sat down, to go get our bin, everything, and so then it's like, well, do we then teach half a lesson each day? Do we cut out the writing part, like what part
Or I've
do you
been
cut out, and
splitting
then
it
you have
and
to
doing
add
2
your
for a
own
day
to
to
make sure
cover
you're hitting
everything.
it?
So I don't want to, spend the whole time about
No,
LLI
yeah.
right
No,
now.
and I love LLI. I
No.
just don't think it's necessarily perfect for kindergarten at the same. I think it's a great program. I'm not saying that I don't like it.
And
or
I'm just
anything.
gonna, from experience,
Right.
have seen,
Or for our kindergarten.
well, I've seen kids, you know, reading at a level D by the end of the year. I mean,
Yeah, we
I
definitely
just,
want it to work, and
Yes,
we
yeah.
just
We're
wanna know
trying,
how,
but-
and in
Okay.
the time limit that we have, how we can make it work.
alright, so we'll have another conversation about LLI for you guys, but I just want you to have the 5 components of reading instruction is your schema. It's your expertise about teaching reading. How you choose to do that professionally is up to you guys. You're my region, okay? Now, when I asked you, where do you go for reading help? What do you do? How do you guys, how do you figure out how to be the best reading teacher? Does anybody read professionally? I mean,
Yes.
I just know there's something that we have I feel like we have a responsibility as an educator to look at ourselves as a professional. And we have to do professional reading, we have to do professional looking, we have to be professionals about knowing and to do what we're doing, okay? It's just important. I mean, and then hopefully your experience by having professional development and having opportunities to learn. But when you know, you have to be that researcher with your kids. Your ultimate goal is you're teaching kids how to read. Teaching kids how to read is based on those 5 pillars. You've got DIBELS, it sort of tells you, it's sort of like going to the doctor and getting your blood work and go, oh, I'm a little low here, I need to add a little this or that. It's a screener. It's just an indicator to let you then, as the professional, to think, what am I going to do when I have those kids in front of me for whatever my literacy block is, but yet really I'm teaching reading all day long when you're a primary teacher. We should look at everything that we do is we're teaching reading. We are teaching reading all day long. And our kids have to fall in love with it. And how are they gonna fall in love with it? Through your modeling, through your passion to have them become readers and that their brain is on fire. Do most kids love informational text? Yes. Do they love it when you sit down and read a great story to them? Yes. And can you be just making sure that you're talking all of those things about what your reading brings? They don't learn it implicitly. They learn it by explicit instruction. And why do you do what you do? Why do you do spellings? Why are you doing this phonics work? How does it all tie in? I think, to me, sometimes what we have to be careful about is if we get all this phonics, but yet now we never apply it, how does that work? Okay? How does that work if you don't apply it? And what do you have to apply the phonics to? You have to apply it to a piece of text. And if you're not applying what you're learning to a piece of text, it just, to me, that we don't accomplish what we need to do. And I can't tell you through my years of seeing, 500 worksheets, circle the picture that goes with this, the picture with that. And then when we stop and reflect, how much time did I really spend with that kiddo reading that day? How much time did I hear Johnny read? Do I really have a sense of how he tackles? Do I know his strategies? How explicit was I? Was I just giving things to do? Because it's easy to give things to do. Does that make sense? Because the data is showing us, as educators, not just you guys, but as educators, and everybody's out there that's a lawmaker, they're all making laws for you and trying to enforce. Do you guys know that your school district has to report for every grade level if your kid is a proficient reader or not, that goes to OSPI? I mean, because the lawmakers want to know. And then the kids that are in LAP, they want to know their growth. They want to know that they're giving us this privilege of the taxpayers' money, and then they want to make sure that we're being held accountable for the dollars that were being given. And they're making, so there's a lot that happens outside. When I look at teachers, you're on the ground. You're the soldiers. You're the foot people on the ground. And we have to take care of you because you're the ones that are gonna make a difference for those kids. And it's not easy. And you have to have, when I'm struggling, where am I going? What am I doing? You're a professional. You have to be thinking, what am I going to do? And I know what my mission is. How am I gonna get these kids reading? Okay? All right. I will share my PowerPoint with Brandy. She can share it with you guys. But on here, I've embedded, because I went in to watch. I wanted to know more about your ReadyGen. So this is ReadyGen, this is ReadyGen, two different people, districts, and how they're talking about how much they love it and what it does. One's from, I think, a school district in Arkansas, one of them's from ReadyGen. And this is a report that says the goodness of ReadyGen. Why? Because what they're thinking ReadyGen does, when your kids take the the SBAC, here's what kids have to do, third graders. They have to read 2 articles, and then they have to write either an opinion, information, or a narrative from 2 articles that they read. And where do they read those articles? They read those articles online. And they have to be able to take notes, and then they all get a different response. So they have to be able to write. And that's from 3rd grade on up, that's how your kids are assessed. That's the SBAC. Now, assessing is not the end-all, but that's a reflection in saying how your kids are doing at Mattawa. And you've got iReady, and you've got Dibble. So you've got plenty enough data to sort of guide your instruction. But what you have to be thinking about, how am I going, every day, how am I going to teach these kids to read? That should be your every day, your mantra. How am I teaching these kids how to read? What am I doing every day? It's teaching a kid how to read. And how do I know that I'm teaching them how to read? Does that make sense? Okay, so you will have access to it. Then the people that I get to talk with tomorrow, we're going to sort of talk about the small group stuff. And, and Brandy wants me just to sort of brainstorm with them, because I think it's mainly intermediate that I get to see tomorrow. And then I'm supposed to come back, so you lovely people get to see me again. And I want you to keep these. I'm going to ask you to bring this to our meeting when we meet again, because we're going to go back, because this is sort of, for me, this is my tool for your understanding and your reflection about today. Does that, okay? And so then I've got, because I know, classroom management, I also was going to put some things in there, because I know the first thing teachers are going to say, always, I can't do this because of how my class behaves. I got too many of them that are rolling on the floor and misbehaving. And I'm just like, what? We still got to teach them to read. We have to teach them to read. Because if we don't, do you want to look at a kid and sort of think, didn't teach you how to read, so I'm not quite sure what you're going to get to do when you graduate from high school. Do you want your kiddos to be that 3rd grader that... So, when I say you have to teach with your hair on fire, holy cow. You have to teach with your hair on fire when it comes to reading. Because it is the end-all of everything, isn't it? And then, I don't think I'm brilliant by any stretch of the means. But at least, I know if I want to figure something out, I'm going to go try to read about it and do my darndest to figure something out. But to be able to not to be able to read, not cool, not good. And so, and it makes me sad that how do we ensure that you guys have the tools that you need? And so I think, Brandy is a very explicit. That's the kind of teacher she was. She was an outstanding teacher. I watched her, my kids had her, she was a math toast, when I went back to teaching, learned so much from her. That gal is explicit. She knows what her goal is, and she knows that she's going to be slow, methodical, and she's gonna be explicit to ensure that her students know what they need to know. And I think all of us, we all have to work on that. You know, that we all have to work on how much did I do that I do, how much did I do the we do before I turned them loose to do the you do. And they come back. It's the explicitness and the systematic. And that you guys, especially at Mattawa, you want your kids. We want these kids. And I'm not sure, you know, their family situations, their parents, are they bilingual? I mean, these kids are a gift, and how incredible that they can speak 2 and 3 languages. What a gift. But we have to make that gift that they all can read, and they can comprehend, and they can write. And that only happens by you being intentional and really building your schema about reading instruction. And there's a lot out there about it now. I mean, they are arguing tooth and nail. And if you know what you need to know your kids, and you need to do, and you need to use data that lets you know how well you're doing. And that progress monitoring, all that kind of stuff, it's important. And learning how to keep things simple. I'm not a big foofy, keep everything simple, write index cards, repeat yourself, repeat yourself, repeat yourself, have fun with it. You know, I always like to keep, like, here are my phonics rules, my blending routines. I mean, you know, I just know you have to do those things, because it's not easy. Okay. I want you now to go through and just a wrap up. So go back to your phonemic awareness. I want you to tell me how phonemic awareness with your reading instruction, and just sort of what you wrote. How is this going to be different, or have I made your level of consciousness a little bit more? If I haven't, but maybe you share what you're doing, so other people, we always learn from each other. I mean, you're only as strong as your team members, and working together is really important. Okay, so phonemic awareness. Give me a thumbs up if you learned a little bit about phonemic awareness. How many of it did it raise your attention about, I need to do it, and I need to be very intentional about? Which two phonemic awareness do you get the biggest bang for your buck? Popping the sounds and phoning, that popping the sounds and then blending together. Popping sounds, blending sounds. Pop, blend. Is it rhyming, kids? But try to do it, but you know you get your biggest bang for your buck. Phoning segmentations and your blending routines. Keeping it, the kids understand that that's what you're doing. Remember how that he said kids learning whole words? He wasn't sort of a fan of that. And when you get in, you start reading about the reading wars, they really want kids to look, clash. That the kids, that their eyes go across, they're looking at those sound letter relationships and building that automaticity. Okay, so someone share with me, phonemic awareness. What are you going to do differently?
Pop the sounds and blend.
Pop the sounds and blend. You think you can do more of it? Can you do more of it? Do you think? Do you think as a music? Okay, now you're gonna do it. Yeah, so nowhere to go, but okay, thank you. Okay, that makes me happy. All right, so that's one. I used to, before my kids to leave the classroom, I won't do this to you, but my poor students had to line up and they had to tell me one thing they learned to get out of the door. My children at home at the dining room table, it was always, what did you learn that day? I mean, you know what I mean? That's why you're here, is to learn something. So, thank you for that. Give her a round of applause for sharing. Okay, all right, so phonics. Someone tell me something about phonics. Well, it is, but what are you gonna, how do you know with what you're teaching? Yeah, what are you gonna, what your connection to what you're teaching? Why is it important? Because it is. Why is phonics important? What did you write for your Ready Jen?
For spelling and writing.
What?
For spelling and writing.
Spelling and writing, and then what else for?
Helps them remember and stuff.
Right, it's the decoding, it's critical, okay, and should we be doing it? Yes, okay, all right, and when you go back and you, till I see again, just that reflection about those 5 components. How am I doing with these 5 components of reading instruction in my day-to-day mission of trying to teach kids how to read? Fluency. Does Ready Jen build a lot of fluency practice? Can you build it in, your fluency practice? How do you build fluency? How do you build fluency practice? Choral, you know, if you just do a ton of choral reading with your kids, echo reading, partner, but you have to think about what are you doing daily that you are working on fluency, and then those people that, you know, you can, I don't know if it comes with like, you know, time readings that you can do that Monday through Friday. Kids can really respond to seeing the number of words, that repeated reading. They like it. Everybody likes to see that you improve. Okay? Vocabulary.
Explicitly teach vocab for understanding, so they can understand what they read.
Well, but you want to teach, what do we want to teach kids with vocabulary? We've got to teach them what? We said the difference between skills and strategies. So we want to teach vocabulary strategies for kids, okay? Because all I know is your Ready Jen just looks like it really plays heavily on vocabulary with the stories. I think that's their whole thing is that vocabulary. All right, and what's my last one?
Comprehension.
And what do we know about comprehension?
To be purposeful.
And then purposeful. How many of you were able to answer how much time your kids spend reading in your classroom? And that was one of the questions, to just sort of be reflective about that they actually, not you, they. So you really want to think about that. How much time do they spend time reading, and how much time, opportunities do you have hearing them read? And even the math, science, so you guys are still reading teachers and hearing that. Okay. Any other questions? Any other response? I hope you did okay. I tried my best, but remember, I'm just that retired teacher. And I've been around, and I've seen greatness, and I've seen not greatness before, but I know how hard it is, so I hope all of you will be more intentional. Got it? And especially with those SPED kids, okay? They have to learn to read. And you have to model, and you have to get their reading brains on fire. And it's not easy, because they have to access 3 parts of their brain. And what were we wired to do? And whose language is the hardest? And it's so much fun when you look at kids and tell them, who in the world was sitting by the campfire and thought of that word? But, you know, our words are from Latin. I mean, they're from all over, okay? So you teaching kids to love the linguistics of our language, and to teach them that they can do it, and the fact that your babies speak 2 and 3 languages. Oh my gosh, they're brilliant. They're brilliant. And they need to know they're brilliant, okay? They are. They're brilliant. Their brains are working. They're getting a lot of activity. They have a lot going on. So they're brilliant. Every day, you better tell them that they're brilliant, okay? All right, so I don't know when I see you again, but I'll see you again. I keep coming to Mattawa. What does Mattawa look like in March? And I keep seeing Jessie. You have to tell Jessie. Okay, what does Mattawa look like in March? Is it beautiful?
Yeah.
It looks